Alright, lie back now. Pull the covers up to your chin and let the candle flicker just a little longer. Because what I'm about to tell you, well, it's not just a story. It's the story. The one about how magic began. Where it came from. Who first whispered to the wind and made it listen. Who carved wands from elder trees and taught dragons to sleep. This story is older than Hogwarts, older than the Sorting Hat, older than even Dumbledore's beard. You've heard the tale of the boy who lived, but you've never heard it like this, not from the very, very beginning. Before we begin tonight's journey through the wizarding world, here's a question for the true fans, just one little detail from deep in the halls of Hogwarts. What magical creature pulls the carriages to the castle, but can only be seen by those who've witnessed death? If you think you know the answer, drop it in the comments. You see, long before Harry Potter ever stepped foot on platform 9 3/4, the Ald was already brimming with magic, wild, dangerous, beautiful magic. There were witches in the mountains of Greece stirring potions before muggles even knew what fire was. There were wizards who tamed storms with songs. And somewhere deep in a misty forest, a castle began to rise stone by enchanted stone, for founders breathing life into the very halls we dream about. We'll get there. But not yet. Tonight, we begin at the very dawn, when magic was raw and reckless, and the stars still remembered the first spells whispered beneath them. We'll meet the tribes of Wandless sorcerers, the runecrafters, the early potion masters. We'll travel to Egypt and Atlantis and the snowy cliffs of Scotland. And when we finally arrive at the founding of Hogwarts, oh, you'll feel like you were sorted yourself. Then come darker days. Goblin rebellions, secret chambers, cursed objects, and a young boy with too much ambition and too little love. You'll meet him too. His name was Tom once. But we'll also find hope. In 4 best friends who called themselves marauders. In a woman with fiery red hair and a heart full of light. In a boy with a lightning scar who would grow to become a symbol for something no dark wizard could destroy. Yes, we'll tell all of it. Slowly. Softly. One enchanted chapter at a time. So, are you ready? Good. Then close your eyes now, and let the magic begin. Long before any wizard waved a wand or opened a spellbook, magic already lived and breathed in the world, wild and untamed. It flowed through the roots of ancient trees, swirled in the mist above moors, and stirred quietly beneath the surface of lakes so old they had no names. Back then, magic didn't come in lessons. It came in moments. A child might cry, and flowers would bloom from the floor. A hunter might whisper to the wind, and it would shift direction. There were no spells. No Latin. Just will and feeling, raw, instinctive, and often unpredictable. The first magical people weren't called witches or wizards. They had no names for themselves. They lived among muggles, unnoticed or misunderstood. In the mountains of what is now Greece, a woman was said to have tamed a lion with a glance. She became legend. In ancient Mesopotamia, a healer could close wounds with her hands alone. She became a goddess to some, a danger to others. They didn't write their magic down. They sang it. Danced it. Carved it into bone and stone. Their rituals were quiet things, not grand like the spells we know today, but deeply personal, passed down not by instruction, but through rhythm, memory, and blood. And yet, with no structure to hold it, magic often fractured. There were those who feared it, and those who craved more of it than they were meant to have. When grief could summon fire, and envy could summon storms, it didn't take long for the world to learn that magic could hurt just as easily as it could heal. Some called these people demons. Others called them gods. But they were just early witches and wizards. Alone. Powerful. Misunderstood. Still, they found one another. Hidden groves and cave circles became the first places of learning. In the Black Forest, witches gathered beneath branches heavy with mistletoe, carving runes into the bark. In the Andes, families shared charms by weaving patterns into cloth. In the Nile Valley, spell work was preserved in murals hidden behind tomb walls, sealed with enchantments no muggle could see. In West Africa, seers mapped the skies and wrote prophecies in chalk that only shimmered under moonlight. It was there that the earliest animagi are believed to have lived, not as students experimenting, but as elders who wore animal forms like second skin. They did not learn to transform. They remembered how. None of these groups had wands. That came later. Instead, they channeled magic through their bodies, through the fingers, the breath, the eyes. Some used staffs carved from lightning-struck trees. Others carried stones said to have fallen from stars. But still, the magic came from within. The tool was never the source. Of course, such power drew attention. Some muggles feared them and turned to fire. Others sought to control them, kings and emperors who whispered of divine blood and chained magic users to their courts. Entire lineages vanished this way, their knowledge locked in vaults or destroyed outright. A few escaped, retreating deeper into forests, mountains, deserts, until the magical world slowly began to hide from the Muggle one. And yet, the magic endured. Even without schools or rules, without ministry pamphlets or prefect patrols, they kept the flame alive. In stories, in lullabies, in secret rituals shared on solstice nights. In every corner of the world, small clusters of magical folk guarded the old ways, quietly, fiercely. What they didn't know was that soon, for remarkable people would rise in the north. And together, they would change everything. They would build a school. They would shape the future. And they would leave behind legends that echo even now, in every whispering corridor and every sorting ceremony. But all of that starts in the next chapter. For now, just remember, before the first one chose its wizard, before the very first cauldron ever simmered in a dungeon, magic already danced in the world, ancient, primal, and very much alive. As the centuries passed, the scattered embers of early magic began to glow brighter. Witches and wizards, once solitary figures moving in shadow, started to gather, not just for safety, but for shared knowledge. And from those gatherings, something new was born, tribes of magic. Not tribes in the sense of banners or bloodlines, but living traditions. Cultures shaped around the rhythm of the wandless world. They did not always call themselves schools or societies, but they were the first to hold magic as a heritage. They treated spells not as tricks to be taught, but as truths to be carried. In the highlands of what is now Scotland, a people whispered to the lochs and listened to the stones. Their magic hummed low and deep, like bagpipes heard from beneath the earth. They read the future in fog, in bird flight, in the way moss curled on rock. Even now, some of that magic lingers in the forbidden forest, and if you walk alone near the Black Lake at dusk, well, you just might hear it. Far across the seas, in the heart of the African continent, magic took a different form. It danced, pulsed, moved with heat and rhythm. These witches and wizards worked not from scrolls, but from memory, shaping spells through drumming and breath, often without speaking a single word. Their magic was in balance, healer and warrior, sun and shadow. And though their communities were vast, they never wrote their magic down, for to them, true power was meant to be lived, not stored. In the far north, among the snow-covered steppes of Siberia, another magical people carved their spells into ice and antler. They worked with the wind, called auroras from the sky, and wore their enchantments as markings on their skin. Some could slip into the form of wolves and return unchanged. Others brewed potions from frozen lichens that could slow the heartbeat of time itself. To the east, in the great river valleys of China and along the islands of Japan, magic became a matter of harmony. These magical communities believed the wand was not a tool but an extension of the soul. They developed the first theories of magical balance, yin and yang, shadow and flame. Their enchanted calligraphy could animate scrolls, awaken statues, and summon memories from moonlight. Entire libraries breathed with quiet spell work. In the dense rainforests of the Amazon, tribes of witches and wizards blended magic with nature so deeply it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. They conjured without wands, speaking with beasts, healing with plants whose names no Muggle had ever spoken. Their potions shimmered with the iridescence of beetle wings and owl feathers. It was here that the early theories of magical ecology first emerged, the idea that magic and the earth are one. Some of these tribes we know by name now. Others vanished, not through failure, but by choice. They left no trace but in the currents of the air, the hush of sacred groves, or in the bloodlines of witches and wizards who still feel a pull toward forgotten places. Yet, even as these magical cultures flourished, they remained largely apart. Distance, fear, and secrecy kept them from forming anything like a united world. There was no ministry. No Gringotts. No Diagon Alley. Only threads, brilliant, ancient threads. Running across the globe, weaving a tapestry too large to see from any one place. But sometimes, in rare moments of convergence, those threads would cross. Traders who moved between kingdoms carried more than silk and spice, they carried stories. A spell cast in the Andes would echo centuries later in a chant whispered in the Alps. A wand carved from dragon heartstring in Eastern Europe bore symbols identical to those found half a world away. And it is from these crossing threads that the great magical schools of the modern world would eventually emerge: Wagadu in Africa, Mahutokoro in Japan, Castelo in Brazil, and yes, eventually, Hogwarts. But that part of the story is still waiting. For before there were schools with towers and rules, there were 4 witches and wizards, for visionaries, who dared to build a home for magic in a world that didn't yet believe it was possible. They didn't come from the same place. They didn't even agree on what magic should be. But together, they carved a castle into the cliffs of Scotland. A living place, enchanted to its very bones. A school. A sanctuary. And they gave it a name that would echo through every corner of wizarding history. That is where we go next. At the edge of a loch in the Scottish Highlands, where the mist rolls thick and the hills whisper ancient things, for witches and wizards stood together, looking at nothing, and seeing everything. They saw towers that didn't yet exist. A bridge that would one day carry students across black water. A hall where candles would float and songs would echo for centuries. They saw the future. And they built it. But long before Hogwarts was carved from stone and spell work, there were simply 4 people, each brilliant, each different, each destined to change the magical world forever. Godric Gryffindor came from the wild moors of the West. His cloak was red, always wind-tossed, and his sword gleamed like it had already survived 100 battles. And perhaps it had. Godric believed in courage, not as the absence of fear, but as the decision to stand in front of it anyway. He dueled with honor, laughed loudly, and believed deeply in giving every witch and wizard, regardless of blood, a chance to prove themselves. He was the first to suggest that any child, even a Muggle-born, should have the right to learn. From the glens of the north came Helga Hufflepuff, a quiet force of nature. She never raised her voice, but people listened. Her magic was the magic of kitchens and gardens, the warm, lasting kind that grows over time. She believed every student had worth, not just the brilliant or bold, and built spaces for them all, safe spaces, warm hearths, full tables. It was Helga who created the kitchens beneath the castle, and Helga who first taught the house elves not as servants, but as magical beings in their own right. She carried a cup that never emptied and a heart that never turned anyone away. From a tower wrapped in ivy and secrets came Rowena Ravenclaw. Some said she was the cleverest witch to ever live. Her eyes missed nothing. Her words were often quiet, but sharp as flint. It was Rowena who designed the moving staircases of Hogwarts, who enchanted the library to breathe and sigh like a living thing. She valued wit, learning, and imagination, not just knowledge, but the ability to see what others could not. It was said she once solved a riddle so complex it folded time in on itself. She wore a diadem, a circlet of silver said to enhance the wisdom of the wearer, a legacy that would ripple far beyond her life. And then there was Salazar Slytherin. He came from the marshlands, where the reeds grew high and the water knew how to lie still. Salazar was brilliant, cunning, and proud. He could speak to snakes, not as beasts, but as old friends. He dreamed of legacy, of purity, of building a school that protected magic not just in strength, but in blood. Salazar believed magic ran strongest through ancient lines, that only those of wizarding descent should be trusted with its secrets. It was a belief that would one day divide them. But in the beginning, the 4 were united. They built a castle together, not just of stone and mortar, but of enchantment led upon enchantment. Its staircases moved, its rooms shifted, and its secrets nested like Russian dolls. Every brick hummed with purpose. Together, they enchanted the lake, befriended the forest, summoned ghosts to keep memory alive. They even charmed portraits to speak, a living archive of thought and feeling that no book could ever match. They created 4 houses, each reflecting the founder's heart: Gryffindor for the brave, Hufflepuff for the loyal, Ravenclaw for the wise, and Slytherin for the ambitious. They enchanted a battered old hat with pieces of their own personalities, a hat that could peer into a child's soul and whisper where they belonged. The Sorting Hat, of course. And for a time, it worked. Students came. Young witches and wizards, some from noble lines, others from farms, villages, cities, forests, arrived by foot, broom, and boat. The halls rang with laughter and wand fire. The founders taught together, dined together, dreamed together. But dreams, like spells, can fracture. Salazar grew silent. His discomfort grew with each Muggle-born student welcomed through the gates. He warned of danger. He spoke of bloodlines and betrayal. He saw enemies where the others saw promise. And eventually, he left. Some say they fought. Others say Rowena wept. Some say Helga kept the peace longer than anyone else could have. But what we know for certain is that before Salazar vanished, he left something behind, a secret buried deep beneath the castle. A hidden room. A monster. And a message meant only for his true heir. The Chamber of Secrets. But that is another chapter. For now, the story remains one of wonder. For visionaries who turned wilderness into sanctuary. Who built a castle where magic could grow in every direction. Where students from every walk of life could come to learn, to live, to become more than they ever imagined. Hogwarts was born not from power, but from belief. And it stood. And soon, it would be tested. Hogwarts did not rise in a day. It rose in silence, in secrecy, and under spell work so ancient it would take centuries to fully understand. The land itself chose the place, a jagged cliff above a great black lake, surrounded by dense forest and veiled in near-constant mist. A place where magic had always run deep beneath the ground, even before the founders arrived. They began with the stones. But not just any stones. These were stones summoned from the riverbeds of ancient mountains, polished by time, and enchanted to remember the names of every hand that touched them. Rowena carved the blueprints in the air, her wand sketching invisible symbols that shimmered like moonlight. Helga sang softly as the foundation settled, weaving protective magic into every joint. Godric raised the great towers with the strength of his own wand, lightning crackling from the tip as stone met sky. And Salazar carved out the depths, shaping dungeons and tunnels beneath the earth, places even the others didn't fully understand. They worked together, and the castle responded. The staircases shifted because Rowena thought learning should never be linear. The great hall's enchanted ceiling, that was her idea too. She once said the stars should always be with us, even indoors. Godric's hand enchanted the battlements and dueling courts, while Helga designed the kitchens and greenhouses, imbuing them with warmth and growth. Salazar built the pipes. He said they were for water and air, and they were. But they also led elsewhere. Deeper. Down into a place no one else was allowed to see. Still, Hogwarts rose, grand, defiant, and alive with magic. Its walls hummed with spells woven by all 4 founders. No 2 corridors were ever quite the same. Doors vanished and reappeared. Windows turned into mirrors. Sometimes, when no one was looking, the castle would shift, as if it were listening, deciding, dreaming. The first students arrived not on trains, but by boat, by broom, by carriage, and on foot. Some wore handmade cloaks and clutched their wands with both hands. Others came from noble lines, stepping confidently through the gates as if destiny had been waiting. They spoke in dozens of languages. They carried different beliefs, different fears, different hopes. And Hogwarts welcomed them all. The Sorting Hat, still wrinkled and slightly charred from a past fire, sat atop its stool and sang for the very first time. Its voice echoed off the stone, ancient and slightly smug, drawing laughter and awe. One by one, it placed students where they would thrive, though even then, it made mistakes. Sometimes a student's bravery burned beneath years of self-doubt. Sometimes loyalty looked like silence. The hat did its best, and that, as it often reminded the founders, was all it could do. Classes began. Charms were taught in airy towers where wind whispered through open windows. Potions were brewed in cellars lit by blue fire and the occasional explosion. Transfiguration took place in a long room with polished floors, where students turned buttons into beetles and back again. Astronomy at midnight. Herbology at dawn. Defense against the unknown, still forming as a discipline, was taught not from books, but from experience. The Forbidden Forest offered plenty. And in the evenings, the students returned to their house common rooms. Gryffindor Tower roared with laughter and firelight, its walls draped in deep reds and golds. Hufflepuff's den, nestled beside the kitchens, smelled of baked bread and always felt like home. Ravenclaw's turret spiraled into the sky, quiet and full of moonlight and puzzles. And Slytherin's common room, sleek, cold, and glittering with reflections from the lake outside, pulsed with ambition and pride. The ghosts came next. Some were invited. Others simply stayed. The Grey Lady walked silently through Ravenk. Helpful, though his decapitation was never quite complete. The castle welcomed them too, for Hogwarts, from the beginning, was a place of memory. It grew. Over the years, new towers were added. Classrooms expanded. The Room of Requirement appeared for the first time, unbidden and unknown. Magical creatures made homes in the woods, and the lake, dark, endless, whispering, became its own kind of classroom. And still, the castle stood. Even when the founders began to drift apart, first in ideas, then in friendship, Hogwarts stood. It did not take sides. It held their enchantments equally. It remembered them all. But Salazar's absence left a shadow. He vanished one winter, without a word. Some say he left in anger. Others believe he was driven by fear, and not for himself, but for what the world would do to magic if left unchecked. Whatever his reasons, he left behind more than a legacy. He left a door. Hidden. Locked. Sleeping. The castle didn't speak of it. Not then. Not for 1,000 years. For now, Hogwarts was whole. Its classrooms echoed with the voices of young witches and wizards from every corner of the known world. Its walls absorbed their footsteps, their dreams, their spells. And somewhere, deep in the foundations, it waited. It did not happen suddenly. The fracture between the founders was not some great explosion of fury or a single stormy duel in the Great Hall. No, it was slower. Like frost creeping along a window pane. Like a curse that begins with a whisper. In the early days, when Hogwarts still smelled of fresh-cut stone and new magic, the four worked in harmony. They taught side by side, sharing meals, laughter, even dreams of what this school might become. Each brought something irreplaceable: bravery, loyalty, wisdom, ambition, and for a while, the balance held. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Salazar Slytherin, always the quietest of the four, had grown more withdrawn. He would vanish for days at a time, retreating into the dungeons or walking alone through the Forbidden Forest. He spent long hours staring into the lake, as if waiting for it to speak back. The others noticed, of course, but they didn't press. Not at first. It began with murmurs, private words exchanged in corridors after curfew. Salazar believed magic should be guarded. That it was not a gift for all, but a birthright. That those born of non-magical parents, Muggle-borns, as they were called even then, might dilute or even destroy the magical world if left unchecked. Godric Gryffindor would not hear of it. He argued with fire in his voice, insisting that courage and talent mattered far more than blood. That anyone with magic, regardless of parentage, deserved to learn. Helga, ever steady, tried to mediate. Rowena remained calm, but the lines around her eyes deepened. She, too, valued intellect above heritage, though her heart was slower to speak than Godric's. But Salazar would not be swayed. He saw danger in the open gates. He spoke of caution, of legacy, of preserving something ancient and pure. He warned of betrayal, not by wizards, but by the world beyond their walls. He remembered the witch burnings, the broken treaties with goblins, the hunters who stalked magical children through the forests of old. And he built the chamber. None of the others knew, not then. Deep beneath the castle, in the veins of the rock where only Slytherin's magic dared to reach, he carved a room in secret. A vast, echoing space, hidden behind a serpentine mouth and sealed with Parseltongue, the language of snakes. It could only be opened by his true heir. And in that chamber, he left a creature. A basilisk. The king of serpents. Born from a chicken's egg hatched beneath a toad, and fed on dark enchantments so ancient they predate modern spellwork. Its gaze could kill. Its breath turned the air to poison. The beast slept, coiled in silence, beneath layers of magic so twisted and deep that even the castle held its breath. Salazar believed the creature would serve his heir. That one day, when the bloodlines of magic had been thinned too far, it would rise to cleanse the school. To restore what he believed was sacred. When he left Hogwarts, he told no one where he was going. Some say he vanished into the marshes he once called home. Others believe he traveled east, deep into lands where his name was never spoken. His final words to the others are lost to time, or perhaps sealed in spells only the castle still remembers. The others were heartbroken. Godric never spoke of it again, though his dueling became more frequent, his lessons fiercer. Rowena became quieter, more focused on her work. The library expanded rapidly during those years, as if she were pouring her grief into ink and stone. Helga was the one who held the school together. It was she who took in the frightened Muggleborns and made them feel welcome. She who kept the castle warm during winters that seemed colder after Salazar left. The Sorting Hat, still filled with fragments of all for founders, began to struggle. Its decisions became less clear. More children were placed into houses that didn't quite fit. A boy who admired bravery but feared being left behind found himself in Slytherin. A girl with fierce wit but a gentle heart went to Ravenclaw. The boundaries blurred. And yet, the hat always defended itself. "I see the truth in them," it would say. Not who they are, but who they might become. The castle changed, too. Some doors refused to open unless asked in the old ways. Certain corridors developed echoes that didn't match the present. And if you stood in the dungeons long enough, sometimes you could hear a slithering, not real, not quite, just at the edge of hearing. The students never knew what had truly happened. They only heard stories, that one of the founders had left. That he'd disagreed. That he'd gone too far. And the chamber? It vanished into legend. Many believed it was a myth, a cautionary tale for first years too curious about the plumbing. Teachers denied its existence. Even the ghosts were silent. Only the castle remembered, and the castle does not speak unless spoken to properly. But the seed had been planted. The first crack in Hogwarts' perfect symmetry. The beginning of a story that would slumber for 1,000 years, waiting for a boy born to a name darker than any the school had ever known. For now, though, the castle still stood. The feasts continued. The Sorting Hat sang each September. But in its deepest stones, a memory was coiled in shadow, waiting. As the centuries turned, Hogwarts stood tall on its cliffside, unchanged in stone, but ever-changing within. Its towers watched silently while the world below shifted, fractured, reassembled. And beyond its enchanted walls, magic was stirring in ways no school, no founder, could control. For not all witches and wizards who walked the world sought knowledge or balance. Some were drawn to a different kind of power, the kind that does not share. The kind that takes. These were the sorcerers. They rose in corners of the world where law had not yet taken hold. Some were brilliant. Many were feared. Few were known by name in their time, but their legacies left scars. They discovered magic not taught in schools, rituals drawn from bone, blood, and fire. They harnessed emotion like fuel, rage to rupture mountains, grief to freeze rivers, desire to bind others to their will. And because no one yet truly governed magic, no one stopped them. In the Carpathian Mountains, a wizard known only as the Nightbinder forged chains from living shadows. In the deserts of North Africa, a sorceress could summon sandstorms with her breath. Entire cities lost beneath dunes because she was denied a wand. In the north, an Icelandic mage once stilled the sea for 7 days, trapping ships and starfish in glassy stasis, because she could. They did not call it dark magic yet. That name would come later. But there was a pattern, whispered through magical communities like the rustle of a turning page. Those who twisted magic to serve only themselves, often left behind nothing but ruins. Even Hogwarts, safe in its highlands, was not untouched. Teachers traveled, students came and went, and with them came rumors. Scrolls containing unsanctioned enchantments. Amulets whose magic pulsed like heartbeats. A student once vanished in the dungeons, only to reappear days later with no memory and glowing eyes. The castle swallowed the incident, as it often did. So the school adjusted. Quietly. New subjects were introduced. Forbidden ones, not to teach, but to warn. Wards were reinforced. The founder's enchantments were stretched, altered, mended like old tapestry threads. But the truth was clear, the magical world was no longer a child's place of wonder. Wands were becoming more common now, no longer rare relics, but crafted tools, refined and precise. Gregorovitch, Ollivander, and wand-makers from across the globe began to understand how core and wooden wizard could intertwine in perfect harmony. Spells were codified. Latin overtook older languages. Magic began to take form. And with that form came fear. Because Muggles, the non-magical majority, were watching. They saw sparks from cloaks, vanishing doors, rumors of beasts in the hills. And what they did not understand, they labeled dangerous. Witchcraft. Trials began. Not always organized, but brutal. Fires. Drownings. Iron cages. Even magical folk who wished only to heal or teach were hunted like beasts. Entire villages went silent. Magical children were hidden or lost. Some witches and wizards fought back. They cursed their attackers into dust. They enchanted forests so no man could walk through twice. They conjured illusions, armies of shadow, thunder from cloudless skies. But the more they fought, the more the divide grew. And so the hiding began. Not just in caves or forests, but in lore. In magic itself. Magical communities retreated. Towns disappeared from maps. Cloaks were turned into invisibility spells. Buildings were layered with Muggle-repelling charms. A language of secrecy was born, subtle spells to conceal footprints, to cloud memory, to turn suspicion into forgetfulness. This was the beginning of the Statute of Secrecy, not yet written, but already whispered. And in those years of fear and retreat, one object passed silently between powerful hands, the Elder Wand. Forged from death, or legend, or both, no one could say. It surfaced in duels that ended too quickly. In rooms where every other wand fell silent. Wizards who held it either vanished, were murdered, or became myth themselves. Some say it passed through the hands of warlords. Others believe it slept for decades at a time, only to awaken when the world needed, or feared, its magic most. It became more than a wand. It became a symbol. Of power. Of death. Of temptation. And yet, Hogwarts endured. Its walls absorbed the fear in the world like old stone absorbs rain. Headmasters came and went. Ghosts were added. Portraits whispered of rising threats. And deep below, beneath the pipes and stone, the chamber remained sealed, untouched, forgotten by all but the hat, the castle, and time itself. But even the oldest spells fray. And as the magical world crept further into shadow, the need for order, true, binding law, became impossible to ignore. The time of secrecy was not enough. A reckoning was coming. one that would shape everything that followed. Not through duels or monsters, but with a single sentence signed in ink and sealed with centuries of silence. The magical world was about to disappear, not from existence, but from sight. History does not always know the truth. It remembers the loudest voices, the brightest flames, the most dramatic duels. But if you know how to listen, really listen, you can hear the real story beneath the legend. That story begins with a boy. Not just any boy. The boy who would grow into the most famous wizard of the age. His name was Merlin. Not just a name carved into the chocolate frog cards or whispered in every wizarding household. Merlin was real. Not immortal, not perfect, but brilliant. And his time marked the shift from the wild and dangerous magic of the ancient world to something more structured, more civil, more lasting. He was born in the late 10th century, just after Hogwarts had been founded. Some say he studied there as a young boy, sorted into Slytherin for his cleverness and ambition, though others dispute that. But wherever he trained, it became clear by adolescence that he was something more. He spoke to animals, not in Parseltongue, but something older, a magic born of empathy, not control. He could enchant music, stretch time, disarm spells without lifting a wand. But what made Merlin different wasn't his power. It was his vision. He believed magic should be used not just for self-preservation, but for peace. He saw the violence erupting between muggles and magical folk, the fear, the fire, the retaliations, and knew that if something wasn't done soon, both worlds would destroy each other. So he did something no great wizard had tried before. He got involved. He became advisor to kings, including the legendary King Arthur, though historians disagree whether Arthur himself was magical. Merlin used his influence to shape treaties, prevent wars, encourage the inclusion of magical advisors in royal courts. He taught Muggle and magical children together. He helped establish councils of wizarding elders, many of which would evolve into today's ministries and magical courts. And he wasn't alone. During this time, a number of great witches and wizards rose beside him, like stars clustered in the same constellation. Morgana Le Fay, sometimes called Morgan, was his rival, perhaps once his student, possibly his sister, the records are unclear. She was a gifted enchantress, a master of healing and illusion. But unlike Merlin, she did not believe in restraint. She thought magic should reign, not hide. Her followers, some call them the Proto-Death Eaters, believed that wizards should rule muggles openly, and that magical power was proof of divine right. It was Morgana who first experimented with wandless necromancy. Some say she created the first enchanted mirror that could trap a soul. Their conflict was not just personal. It was philosophical. And their duels, when they happened, reshaped forests, bent rivers, shattered memory itself. There are places in England where no spell has worked since those days, where the air itself remembers too much and refuses to cooperate. It was during this time that the first Wizards' Council formed, a precursor to the modern Ministry of Magic. They met in secret caverns beneath London, surrounded by anti-Muggle enchantments so strong that even now, many of those chambers remain untouched. These early councils weren't perfect, they fought, they bribed, they schemed, but they agreed on one thing: magic needed rules. And so the earliest magical laws were written. Not all were fair. Not all were followed. But they set precedent. Unforgivable curses were first recorded and classified. The possession of a phoenix feather wand without registration became illegal in parts of Europe. The breeding of magical beasts near Muggle settlements was banned. And perhaps most importantly, a proposal was drafted, just a draft at first, for something called a Statute of Magical Secrecy. It was controversial. Many witches and wizards believed hiding was cowardly. But others, especially those who remembered the burnings and lynchings of the past, knew the cost of visibility. Merlin supported the draft. Morgana opposed it. And between their two camps, a divide formed that would never fully close. At Hogwarts, their debates echoed for generations. By now, the founders had passed, Rowena of Heartbreak, Helga of Old Age, Godric and Salazar, each vanishing into legend. The school continued under successors, but the founders' house philosophies hardened. Slytherin students were taught to prize secrecy and cunning. Gryffindors were taught to act. Ravenclaws to question. Hufflepuffs to endure. It is during this age that the deathly Hallows first appear in myth. Whether they were truly forged by death or merely symbolic of the magical forces at play, mastery, resurrection, and invisibility, remains debated even among the wisest unspeakables. But what's known is this? The Elder Wand surfaced in this era, trading hands violently. The Resurrection Stone, once mounted on a ring, passed through a line of cursed descendants. The Cloak of Invisibility, gifted to a man named Ignatus Peverell, remained hidden in Godric's Hollow for centuries. These objects would not resurface together again, until Harry. And still, through all of this, Hogwarts endured. Its magic deepened. Its ghosts thickened. Its tradition settled into place. The first Tri-Wizard tournaments were held. The foundations of the library's restricted section were established. Forbidden forest creatures were catalogued, then promptly ignored by generations of daring students. Centaurs took up residence in the forest's heart. Peeves, chaos incarnate, was born, not of flesh or spell, but of the castle's accumulated mischief. Even the portraits became more talkative. And the Chamber of Secrets remained sealed. Untouched. Dreaming. Waiting. The time of Merlin ended not with a war, but with quiet. Morgana disappeared. Some say she was killed. Others believe she became something else, not quite ghost, not quite living. Merlin, legend says, walked into a cave and never returned. His wand, a staff, really, was buried beside him. Or perhaps it became the Elder Wand. Or perhaps it never existed at all. But his legacy did. He gave us the framework. The idea that magic must serve the world, not rule it. That secrecy can be mercy, and law can be protection. And with the centuries that followed, that idea became reality. The Statute of Secrecy was signed. And the wizarding world vanished, not in defeat, but in defiance. Hidden from Muggle eyes, it grew stronger, stranger, and ever more enchanted. But in that silence, in that growing distance between the magical and non-magical worlds, a new kind of danger began to stir. The world was ready for order. But it was not done with chaos. The magical world had always existed in plain sight, cloaked, yes, but not hidden. For centuries, witches and wizards walked among Muggles, healing in back rooms, enchanting wells for good harvests, flying brooms by moonlight and hoping the clouds would hold. But by the late 1600s, the veil was tearing. Muggle fear had sharpened. Witch hunts spread like wildfire, not just in Britain, but across Europe, into the Americas, beyond. Entire magical bloodlines vanished. Children with accidental magic were burned before they could say their first spell. Families fled their homes, cloaking themselves not in glamour but in silence. And yet, some still tried to help. To speak. To explain. They were met with fire. So, at last, the magical world made a decision, one that would shape every story to come. They disappeared. Not in body, but in presence. In memory. They wove the greatest enchantment the world had ever seen, not a single spell, but a global covenant, a tapestry of concealment, stitched by every ministry, every school, every wandmaker, every seer, every animagus and alchemist and aura. It became law. It became the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, ratified in 1689 and fully enacted by 1692, the year the Moo. A necessity. A few whispered that it was already too late, that the magical world would rot from within if it hid too well. But the statute passed. Every magical government in every country had to agree. And when they did, 1,000 small miracles happened all at once. Entire towns vanished, cloaked in charms that made them look like ruins, swamps, or blizzards to the Muggle eye. Wizards enchanted themselves to vanish from photographs, newspapers, census rolls. Creatures were hidden or relocated, dragons to remote valleys, werewolves to government-monitored forests, centaurs allowed to retreat deeper into their own sacred woods. Spells were placed in layers, like frosting on a cake. Muggle-repelling charms on all major magical sites. Memory charms authorized for official use by obliviators, a new profession formed entirely to deal with Muggles who saw too much. And most controversially, magical children born to Muggle parents were to be monitored, then contacted on their 11th birthday, if deemed stable. The Muggle world, for the most part, simply forgot. Their stories of witches became fairy tales. Their fears became folklore. They told their children that magic wasn't real, and those children grew up to believe it. But the magical world didn't forget. They adjusted. The Ministry of Magic, now fully formed, took on new power. Departments were created, magical games and sports. Regulation of magical creatures. The Department of Mysteries, which no one talks about, even now. Laws were passed to limit wand use, especially in the presence of Muggles. Wizarding newspapers were founded, the Daily Prophet chief among them, and Hogwarts, always adapting, added curriculum on concealment, deception, and the ethical use of memory charms. Still, not everyone accepted the statute. In some corners of the world, wizards rebelled, declaring their right to walk openly. They were swiftly exiled or worse. Others found loopholes. Magical villages were built in places where no Muggles lived at all. In Britain, one such village was Hogsmeade, the only all-magical village in the country, nestled right beside Hogwarts, hidden in snow and secrecy. And then there were those who obeyed the letter of the law, but not its spirit. These witches and wizards hoarded their magic, tightened their bloodlines, grew secretive and suspicious. They feared Muggles, or hated them. They believed the statute was not safety, but surrender. They taught their children that the old days were better. Some claimed descent from Salazar Slytherin. Others, quietly, began to seek the chamber again. Hogwarts remained the one place where all magical children, regardless of parentage, gathered under one roof. But the tension, it lingered in the halls. You could feel it in how the Slytherin common room curled closer to the lake. How Ravenclaw Tower began to demand riddles that some students could never solve. How Gryffindors grew louder at meals. How Hufflepuffs kept smiling, but locked their doors at night. The statute changed more than the outside world. It changed the magical one, too. Lines were drawn. Secrets were kept. And somewhere, deep in the dungeons beneath a bathroom no one used, the air began to stir again. The chamber, still sealed, had waited centuries already. It would wait a few more. Because something else was coming. Something brilliant. Something dangerous. A boy, born in a quiet orphanage in London, with a name that would echo through every corridor of Hogwarts, and chill the world for a second time. But that part of the story comes later. For now, the magical world has vanished behind the veil. The rules are written. The portraits are watching. And the next great age is about to begin. By the dawn of the 18th century, the magical world had hidden itself completely. No more public spell work. No flying broomsticks at midday. No dragons glimpsed over mountains, or will-o'-the-wisps mistaken for angels. To the Muggle world, magic had died. But to the magical world, it had only become quiet. Controlled. And to control something as wild as magic, you need structure. Rules. Systems. You need a ministry. The British Ministry of Magic, officially established in 1707, was the first of its kind, not a loose council of elders or secretive underground gatherings, but a centralized magical government with departments, offices, records, and, naturally, paperwork. Its founder and first minister was 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, a stern and practical wizard who believed the magical world could only survive if it operated like the Muggle one, but better. He established the first departments that still shape the wizarding world today. Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Auras, Hit Wizards, and the 𝓢𝓮𝓮𝓮𝓹 itself. Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, divided further into beasts, beings, and spirits. Department of International Magical Cooperation, formed to ensure other ministries upheld the statute. Department of Mysteries, which no one talks about. The ministry, like magic itself, grew quickly. Flu networks were standardized. Apparition licenses became required. The trace was placed on underage wizards to detect unauthorized magic, a protection that would later follow Harry Potter from birth. And the wizarding economy stabilized, with Gringotts growing into a true banking institution under a tense, silent agreement with the goblins. The ministry also became home to the 𝓢𝓮𝓮𝓮𝓹, the High Court of Magical Law, a body that merged ancient wizarding customs with Gamp's new order. Robed judges. Trials beneath enchanted ceilings. And laws that, while designed for safety, often bent to power and reputation. And not all was fair. The laws favored the old families. The purebloods. Those who already understood how to bend the system. Muggleborns were welcomed, yes, Hogwarts ensured that, but in ministry halls, they often found their names questioned, their backgrounds examined, their ambition redirected. Some magical beings, centaurs, werewolves, goblins, house elves, were denied full rights under the law. The ministry deemed them non-wizard part humans or beings of limited magical responsibility. Entire communities were pushed into the margins. Even now, portraits in the Department of Magical Creatures shake their heads when asked about it. Still, the ministry worked. It functioned. It protected. It caught rogue spellcasters, maintained the secrecy laws, coordinated with other nations. The International Confederation of Wizards, with a supreme mugwump at its head, was born from these efforts. Albus Dumbledore would one day hold that title. But that was still far off. In the centuries that followed, wizarding society grew comfortable. Stable. Perhaps too stable. Magic, once raw and unpredictable, was now studied in neat little scrolls, divided into subjects and syllabi. Wand lore became a profession. Broom racing became a sport. The Quidditch World Cup was created. Magical education standardized globally, with each nation developing its own schools under heavy regulation. In Britain, Hogwarts remained the crown jewel, a school so powerful, so old, and so revered that even the ministry seldom questioned it. Its headmasters and headmistresses ruled its halls like monarchs, answering only to magic itself. But Hogwarts, too, had changed. The castle had grown quieter, its enchantments older, its portraits wiser. Peeves remained, ever chaotic, ever grinning. The ghost still roamed, joined over time by new figures, each with a story, a regret, a warning. The Sorting Hat still sang. Its songs grew longer, more thoughtful. Each year, it weighed not just who a student was, but what the world might need from them. Sometimes it quivered. Sometimes it paused. And sometimes, very rarely, it asked the professors to watch that one closely. The castle whispered of coming change. Because beneath the ministry's glossy order, something darker stirred. Gellert Grindelwald, a boy with fire in his eyes and stars in his mind, began to write dangerous things in a Durmstrang notebook. Albus Dumbledore, brilliant and burdened, sat in Godric's Hollow, already losing too much. And in a cold, grey orphanage in London, a boy was born who would rewrite everything. But the ministry didn't notice. It had grown used to silence. To order. To keeping the world hidden, stable, routine. It had forgotten that magic, no matter how many laws are written around it, does not like cages. The next chapter would not be written in ink, but in prophecy. And in blood. Magic had gone quiet, not absent, not forgotten, but tamed. In the centuries following the creation of the ministry, wizarding life settled into a kind of enchanted routine. Laws were passed, rules upheld, and students sorted. The statute of secrecy was in full effect. Hogwarts trained its pupils, the ministry regulated their futures, and Gringotts weighed every canute. But magic doesn't like routine. It tolerates it, until someone comes along and reminds the world that the fire in its belly still burns. The 19th and early 20th centuries were an age of brilliant disruptors, witches and wizards who, like the founders before them, changed everything. Some were champions. Others, catalysts. A few were storms in human form. Let's begin with one who straddled the line between legacy and heresy. Gellert Grindelwald, the Scholar of Shadows. There had been dark wizards before. But Grindelwald was different. He wasn't born twisted. He was born brilliant. Raised in Eastern Europe, Gellert attended 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 Institute, a school known for its openness to the dark arts, not to teach cruelty, but to understand power. Even as a teenager, Grindelwald's magical ability outstripped his professors. He saw connections others didn't. He saw limits, and wanted to break them. He became obsessed with an idea, that secrecy had cost the wizarding world its greatness. Where Merlin once sought balance with muggles, Grindelwald sought dominance. Where the founders disagreed over blood, he declared that only the magical should rule, not just over themselves, but over everyone. His motto, for the greater good, was carved, quite literally, into stone beneath 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, the fortress prison he would later build. A fortress that would one day become his own cell. But before that, before the fire, before the war, before the fall, there was a summer. In Godric's Hollow, of all places. The same village that once nurtured the Peverell brothers. The same land once walked by Gryffindor himself. There, Gellert met Albus Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore, the boy before the beard. When most think of Dumbledore, they think of the old man, half-moon spectacles, long silver beard, eyes like blue fire. But once, he was a boy. A boy brilliant beyond measure. A boy already mourning, his mother dead in a magical accident, his sister Ariana deeply traumatized and unwell, his father imprisoned for attacking muggles who had harmed her. A boy burdened by guilt, by talent, by expectation. When Gellert arrived in Godric's Hollow, the two minds collided like twin stars. Together, they dreamt of reshaping the world. They studied the deathly Hallows, not just as myth, but as historical possibilities. They whispered of building a new magical order, not for cruelty, but for peace, enforced by power. And maybe, just maybe, they believed they were the ones meant to bear the Hallows together. But ambition is a spell with too many syllables. One day, an argument erupted. Between Albus, Gellert, and Albus's brother Aberforth. A duel followed. No one remembers who cast the fatal curse. But Ariana, their sister, died. Gellert fled. Dumbledore stayed. Neither of them was ever the same again. The rise of Grindelwald. In the years that followed, Grindelwald disappeared into the shadows, only to re-emerge in whispers. Won duels across Eastern Europe. Villages turned to glass. Forbidden charms rewritten and redistributed to followers. A new symbol began to appear, a triangle, a circle, a line. The mark of the Hallows. The mark of his movement. He did not call them Death Eaters. That would come later. But they shared a hunger, not for gold or glory, but for magical supremacy. Somewhere during this time, Gellert found the Elder Wand. Whether he took it from a defeated master or discovered it buried beneath centuries of blood, no one knows. But from that moment on, no one could defeat him. Until one man tried. Dumbledore's duel. It is said that in 1945, after years of silence, Dumbledore met Grindelwald in a duel so powerful it cracked the sky. No written record survives. No pensive memory has been shared. But every portrait, every whisper in Hogwarts stone, confirms it. The duel lasted hours. It lit the air above 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 with fire and lightning. It ended with silence. And Dumbledore won. He took the Elder Wand, though no one knew at the time. And Grindelwald was imprisoned in the fortress he built for others. Dumbledore never spoke publicly of it again. Tom Riddle, the boy in the shadows. But as one dark force fell, another rose unnoticed. In a cold, grey London orphanage, a boy named Tom Marvolo Riddle was born to a muggle father and a witch mother who died moments after childbirth. His father had abandoned them. His mother's wand died with her. Tom grew up alone, cruelly self-reliant. But he wasn't ordinary. Strange things happened when he was angry. Animals listened to him. Bullies feared him. When Dumbledore, now a Hogwarts professor, came to visit, Tom was 11. Their meeting was cold. Tom didn't thank him. He asked if he could do magic to make people suffer. He admitted he could already control things without a wand. But he accepted the invitation to Hogwarts. And the moment he stepped into the castle, the ancient stone stirred. He was sorted into Slytherin, of course. He was a model student. Brilliant. Quiet. Charismatic. Unimpeachable. But behind the scenes, he was already building something. He began searching for information about Salazar Slytherin. He discovered the Chamber of Secrets. He learned Parseltongue, a language he had been born knowing. In 1943, he opened the chamber. He released the basilisk. And a student, Myrtle Warren, died. But Tom, always clever, framed someone else, 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, a third year with a love of dangerous creatures. The school was nearly closed. Hagrid was expelled. Tom received a medal for special services to the school. And the basilisk returned to sleep. The castle remembered. It always remembers. Drawing the threads. In Grindelwald, we saw ambition in search of order. In Dumbledore, brilliance burdened by guilt. In Riddle, the echo of Salazar, amplified by pain. Each of them mirrored the past. Grindelwald's belief in wizard dominance mirrored Morgana's defiance of Merlin. Dumbledore's guilt and leadership recalled Godric Gryffindor, forced to hold a dream together. Tom Riddle was the shadow of Slytherin's legacy, darker, colder, more precise. And all of them, laid the path for what was to come. Because Tom was not content with tricks or lies. He was looking for something deeper. Something forbidden. And soon, the castle would whisper a new word for darkness. Horcrux. The Elder Wand had always demanded blood. From the moment Anch Peverell first held it, its path through history was written in violence, duels, betrayals, and sudden deaths. The wand would never truly belong to anyone who took it peacefully. Loyalty could not be won, it had to be seized. And so it passed, from warlord to warlock, from hand to grave and back again. It travelled from Emeric the Evil to Egbert the Egregious, through unknown wizards and cursed duels, until it reached Gellert Grindelwald, who claimed it in secret and wielded it in shadow. But Grindelwald, as powerful as he was defeated, not by theft or treachery, but in fair duel. Albus Dumbledore, his former friend and greatest rival, became the Elder Wand's master in 1945. And yet, no one knew. Dumbledore never announced it. He never boasted. He never even drew it in public unless absolutely necessary. He understood the wand's curse, it created obsession. It inspired murder. It turned good men into tyrants. So he buried its story beneath silence, hoping that if no one knew it was his, no one would try to take it. But elsewhere, another wand, a much darker one, was being forged. Not carved from wood. Not laced with phoenix feather or dragon heartstring. But crafted from flesh, fear, and soul. The invention of the Horcrux. Tom Marvolo Riddle, still a student, had begun asking dangerous questions. In his 5th year at Hogwarts, he approached Professor Slughorn, a cheerful potioneer with a fondness for famous students. Tom asked about a rare and terrible form of dark magic, the Horcrux. Slughorn, unsettled, lied to him. But Tom persuaded him otherwise. We know this memory because Dumbledore eventually recovered it, a twisted version first, later the full truth, and preserved it in his pensieve. A Horcrux, Slughorn explained, is an object in which a dark wizard hides a fragment of their soul. It is created through murder, an act so unnatural that it rips the soul. The object then becomes tethered to that fragment, keeping the wizard alive even if their body is destroyed. But Tom had not asked what a Horcrux was. He asked how many a soul could be split into. 7. It was the most magically powerful number, and to Riddle, the most desirable. Slughorn, horrified, tried to forget the conversation. But by then, it was too late. Tom Riddle's Horcruxes, Canon Order. Tom Riddle's diary, created in 1943. Contains a memory capable of full possession. Created after the murder of Myrtle Warren, Moaning Myrtle, using her death to seal the soul fragment inside. Released the basilisk to attack Muggleborns and cleanse Hogwarts. Marvolo Gaunt's ring. A family heirloom, contains the resurrection stone, though Tom never knew its true purpose. Created after murdering his father and grandparents in Little Hangleton. Cursed with powerful dark magic, later cracked and worn by Dumbledore, who paid the price. Salazar Slytherin's locket. Stolen from the Gaunt family. Stored in a seaside cave protected by inferi, poison, and illusions. Created with the murder of a Muggle vagrant or prisoner. Helga Hufflepuff's cup. Stolen from Hepzibah Smith, whom Tom poisoned. Hidden in the Lestrange family vault at Gringotts, surrounded by protective spells and cursed duplicates. Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem. Found through Helena Ravenclaw's ghost, the Grey Lady. Hidden in the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts. Nagini the Snake. Became a Horcrux sometime after Voldemort's return to corporeal form. The only living Horcrux, allowing Voldemort to control her fully. Killed by Neville Longbottom in the final battle. Harry Potter, unintentional. Created the night Voldemort tried to kill baby Harry and his spell backfired. A piece of Voldemort's soul latched onto the only living thing in the room. The only Horcrux created accidentally, and the one Voldemort never knew existed. The wand's path crosses again. While Voldemort created Horcruxes to achieve immortality, he never understood the Elder Wand. He craved power, yes, but he misunderstood the nature of loyalty. He did not know Dumbledore had mastered the wand. He did not know that Draco Malfoy had disarmed Dumbledore. In forbidden magic, creating Horcruxes, gaining followers. He returned years later, changed, with a name that would echo across every ministry and graveyard. Lord Voldemort. The name Tom Riddle died. His soul, already fractured, no longer fit in his own skin. His features twisted. His eyes changed. His humanity thinned. He returned to Hogwarts, seeking the defense against the Dark Arts post. Dumbledore denied him. The post was cursed that year, and remained cursed forever after. No professor would last more than 1 year. So Voldemort turned elsewhere. He gathered those loyal to his cause, the Death Eaters, many from old pureblood families, the Malfoys, the Lestranges, the Carrows, and more. He spread fear. He whispered that Muggleborns were thieves, stealing magic from true wizarding bloodlines. He recruited giants, werewolves, dark creatures. He cast fear across Britain. And in the shadows, his Horcruxes waited, anchoring his life across 7 cursed artifacts. The Elder Wand slept, hidden in Dumbledore's office. The Chamber of Secrets remained closed. But the world was hurtling toward war. The Second Great Shift. This was no longer the age of founders. No longer the age of hiding or lawmaking. This was the age of death. Magic, once born in song and soil, was now split into weapons. Wands were no longer tools. They were choices, binding the soul to action. And the boy with the lightning scar, the last Horcrux, had not yet even turned 1 year old. When people speak of Dumbledore, they often speak in fragments: the beard, the twinkle, the wand. The man who bested Grindelwald. The headmaster who guided Harry Potter. The only wizard Voldemort ever feared. But Albus Dumbledore's power did not come from spells. It came from knowing. Knowing people. Knowing pain. Knowing what it meant to fail, and to carry failure until the end of one's life. The boy who had once walked alongside Gellert Grindelwald, dreaming of world order, had become something far more dangerous, a man who understood how ambition could destroy everything. After the duel of 1945, when Grindelwald was defeated and imprisoned, the magical world named Dumbledore a hero. But he never called himself that. He knew what he'd done, and what he hadn't. He had not stopped Grindelwald before the war. He had waited. He had hesitated. Because part of him had believed in it for the greater good. And worse, he had loved him. Ariana Dumbledore, the wound that never healed. To understand Albus, one must understand Ariana. She was born with magic, but it turned inward. After being attacked by Muggle boys at age 6, she never spoke again. Her magic would burst out uncontrollably, sometimes violently. Her father, Percival, took revenge and was imprisoned for life in Azkaban, never revealing why he had acted to protect Ariana's condition. Her mother, Kendra, kept the family in hiding. When Kendra died in an accident caused by Ariana's uncontrolled magic, Albus returned home from Hogwarts, brilliant, resentful, and trapped. Then came Grindelwald and the dream of escape. But it all ended in a flash of green light. In a three-way duel between Albus, Aberforth, and Gellert, Ariana was killed. No one ever knew whose spell struck her. Albus never forgave himself. He never spoke her name lightly. And when he was offered power, head of the Wizengamot, Minister for Magic, he refused, again and again. He understood what power cost. The rise of Voldemort, and the fall of safety. By the 1970s, Voldemort's name was everywhere, though few dared speak it aloud. He moved like smoke, in and out of newspapers, reports, battlefields, memories. He rarely killed needlessly, but he killed often. He infiltrated the ministry, enchanted artifacts, recruited legions, and Dumbledore watched. He watched as his old student fell further than any before him. He watched the rise of the Death Eaters, some of whom had once sat in his classrooms. He watched Hogwarts fill with fear again. But he also prepared. Dumbledore founded the Order of the Phoenix, a secret group of resistance fighters. James and Lily Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Marlene McKinnon, Frank and Alice Longbottom, Arabella Figg, Daedalus Diggle, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and many more. They fought in shadows, not to win territory, but to protect lives. Meanwhile, the Ministry insisted everything was fine. But it wasn't. Voldemort was seeking something. Something deeper than war. Something older than blood. And then, it happened. The prophecy, hard canon. One night, a young woman named Sybil Trelawney auditioned for a teaching post at Hogwarts. She met Dumbledore in the Hog's Head Inn, a rundown pub in Hogsmeade. During the meeting, she entered a trance and spoke the prophecy. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The prophecy was overheard, half of it, anyway, by Severus Snape, then a Death Eater. He ran to Voldemort, believing he had delivered a weapon. Voldemort interpreted the prophecy to mean a child, either Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom, both born at the end of July 1980 to parents who had defied him 3 times. He chose Harry, a half-blood like himself, born of Lily and James Potter. And in that moment, he sealed his own fate. Severus Snape's plea, hard canon. When Snape learned that Lily Potter, the woman he had loved since childhood, would be targeted, he panicked. He went to Dumbledore. He begged for her life. And Dumbledore, who had known regret longer than anyone alive, made a decision that would bind both men forever. He offered Snape redemption, but on Dumbledore's terms. Snape would defect. He would become a double agent. He would help protect Harry, even after Lily was gone. And in return, Dumbledore would never reveal Snape's truth until the boy was ready. Thus began a game deeper than Voldemort knew. The fall of the Potters. Dumbledore instructed the Potters to go into hiding using a Fidelius charm, the most powerful concealment spell known. But they chose the wrong secret keeper. They trusted Peter Pettigrew. On October 31st, 1981, Voldemort arrived at Godric's Hollow. He killed James. He confronted Lily and gave her a chance to step aside. She refused. She stood between the Dark Lord and her son. She died. And when Voldemort turned his wand on baby Harry, his Avada Kedavra curse rebounded. Destroyed his body, cracked his soul again, and tethered a fragment to the only living thing in the room. That fragment lived inside Harry. The boy who lived. Dumbledore's final act. Dumbledore arrived too late to stop the attack. But he was not too late to act. He left Harry with the Dursleys, knowing only blood magic, tied to Lily's sacrifice, could protect him until he came of age. He took custody of the Elder Wand, though he told no one. And he began preparing Harry for a future the boy would not understand until he was ready to die. Dumbledore knew all along. About the prophecy. About the Horcrux. About the wand. About the child. And still, he let it all unfold. Because if there was one truth Albus Dumbledore had learned, from Ariana, from Gellert, from Tom, from every era of the magical world, it was this. Power is not what you take. It is what you choose not to use. And now, the final war was beginning. The boy with the scar was growing. The Chamber of Secrets would open again. And the past, so long buried in stone, would walk the halls once more. Voldemort did not rise like a storm. He rose like fog. Quiet at first, swirling in politics, rumors, disappearances, until no one could remember when it had begun. But by the late 1970s, the war was no longer secret. It had already begun. The Ministry of Magic would not name it for what it was. Even as bodies mounted, even as fear choked the streets of Diagon Alley, the official stance was containment. But the truth was unmistakable. The dark mark began to appear in the sky above wizarding homes. Whole families vanished overnight. Creatures long banished from the magical world were returning to fight. Giants, werewolves, inferi, and worse. And at the center of it all, a man no longer called Tom Riddle. He was Voldemort now, nameless to most, a whisper on the wind, a phantom in the night. His followers, the Death Eaters, bore his mark burned into their arms. They acted as his will, terrorizing, recruiting, executing. Not just those who opposed him, but Muggle-borns, blood traitors, even ministry employees who hesitated. He did not aim to rule through law. He aimed to rule through fear. The Order of the Phoenix. In the face of that darkness, Dumbledore built light. The Order of the Phoenix was formed in secret, a resistance that operated outside ministry control, answering only to Dumbledore himself. It was not a formal army. There were no ranks. Only a shared vow to stand between Voldemort and the innocent. Members included James and Lily Potter, Sirius Black, fiery and loyal, Remus Lupin, the werewolf with a lion's heart, Frank and Alice Longbottom, Marlene Kinnan, later murdered with her entire family, Gideon and Fabian Pruitt, twin brothers who died fighting 5 Death Eaters, Emmeline Vance, Benji Fenwick, Caradoc Dearborn, and others now only remembered in whispers. Each had their strengths. Each faced death every day. They used safe houses, enchanted owls, two-way mirrors, and Fidelius charms to communicate and protect one another. Grimmauld Place, once the dark home of the Black family, would later become Order headquarters. But for now, they moved in shadows, defending, disrupting, delaying. Because no one could stop Voldemort. Not yet. The Ministry's collapse. The Ministry of Magic, for all its laws, was outmatched. Its auras, magical law enforcement, were stretched thin, forced to act without trial. Some became as brutal as the enemy they hunted. Others simply vanished. Laws were passed to allow unforgivable curses in defense. Spies infiltrated the ministry. Trials became interrogations. And still, Voldemort moved unseen. Worse, he was building Horcruxes, anchoring himself to life with murder and magic so foul that even those who practiced the dark arts flinched. He split his soul 7 times, embedding it in objects that would outlive centuries. And no one knew. Not even Dumbledore. Not yet. The Potters and the prophecy. Everything changed with a prophecy. Not a guess. Not a vision. But a prophecy, spoken by Sybil Trelawney and heard by Severus Snape, who delivered part of it to Voldemort. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Voldemort believed this meant a child, a threat. Two fit the description. Neville Longbottom. Harry Potter. He chose Harry. Why? Perhaps because Harry, like himself, was a half-blood. Perhaps because Harry's parents were bolder. More visible. Perhaps because fate is not always logical. But in choosing Harry, Voldemort marked him, quite literally. The betrayal. The Potters went into hiding under the Fidelius charm. It would protect them, as long as their secret keeper held firm. They chose Peter Pettigrew. Not Sirius, their closest friend, but Peter, quiet, unassuming. It was a fatal mistake. Peter betrayed them. On October 31st, 1981, Voldemort entered their home. James died at the stairs. Wandless, protecting his family. Lily died in Harry's room, refusing to move aside. And Voldemort fell. He cast the killing curse on a baby. But Lily's sacrifice invoked ancient, powerful magic, love, freely given, which Voldemort neither understood nor valued. The curse rebounded, destroying his body and tearing his soul apart once again. A piece of that broken soul attached to the only thing it could, Harry. The Horcrux he never meant to make. Aftermath. The magical world woke in stunned silence. The Dark Lord was gone. His followers scattered. Some were captured. Some claimed they had been cursed. Some, like Bellatrix Lestrange, refused to surrender and were imprisoned in Azkaban. Peter Pettigrew faked his own death, framed Sirius Black, and vanished as a rat. Sirius, innocent, was sent to Azkaban without trial. Remus Lupin lost his last connection to his friends. And Dumbledore took Harry to Privet Drive, placing him with Petunia Dursley, the only blood relative of Lily Evans. The war was over. Or so it seemed. But Dumbledore, ever watchful, ever wary, knew the truth. Voldemort was not dead. Not truly. Not while his soul lived on in hidden places. Not while the Elder Wand still hummed quietly beneath its owner's touch. Not while a boy with a scar dreamed of green light and screams. The first Wizarding War had ended. But the second had already begun. Magic began as raw instinct, wild, beautiful, and dangerous, passed through ancient tribes until the founders built Hogwarts, uniting the magical world for the first time. Over centuries, as secrecy took hold and power centralized through the Ministry, legends like Merlin, Grindelwald, and Dumbledore rose and fell, while Tom Riddle quietly transformed into Lord Voldemort, anchoring his soul to cursed objects and setting the world on fire. In the shadows of prophecy, betrayal, and love, a baby survived the killing curse, and the Dark Lord fell, but not for the last time. When the dust settled on the night Voldemort fell, the magical world breathed again for the first time in years. Fires were extinguished. Names were spoken aloud again. Children walked safely to Diagon Alley, and Auras returned home to sleep through the night. But beneath the relief, something fragile stirred. Because the war wasn't won. Not completely. Too many truths had been buried. And one of them was the prophecy. The prophecy, revisited. It had been spoken in a back room at the Hog's Head Inn by Sybil Trelawney, a woman not yet known for her eccentric predictions or wild eyes. In a single moment of true seersight, she had channeled something far beyond herself. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. And either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Severus Snape, then a loyal Death Eater, overheard only the first part. He did not hear the end. He did not know what it meant. But what he did hear, he delivered to his master. And Voldemort made his choice. The Longbottoms or the Potters. Two children fit the description. Neville Longbottom, born July 30th, to Aurors who had defied Voldemort 3 times. Harry Potter, born July 31st, to Order members who had done the same. Voldemort chose Harry. Perhaps he saw himself in the boy or a half-blood child raised without wealth or title. Perhaps he sensed the deeper danger in Harry's future. But in choosing, he fulfilled the prophecy himself. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. The lightning scar on Harry's forehead was no accident. It was not just a wound. It was a signature. A seal. A magical bond that neither wizard could break. The betrayal of Peter Pettigrew. While the world celebrated the fall of Voldemort, few knew it had been made possible by a betrayal. Peter Pettigrew, friend to James and Lily Potter, had been their secret keeper, entrusted with their location under the Fidelius charm. He gave it to Voldemort. After the attack, he staged his own death in a crowded Muggle street, framing Sirius Black, who had gone to confront him. Peter blew apart the road, killing a dozen Muggles, and vanished, leaving behind only a finger. Sirius was arrested without trial and sent to Azkaban, where he remained for 12 years. Peter transformed into a rat. And quietly, he made his way to the home of a wizarding family with a red-haired boy and a hand-me-down wand. The Longbottoms and the Lestranges. While the Potters were dead and Sirius imprisoned, another family was shattered. Frank and Alice Longbottom, decorated war heroes and Order members, were captured by Bellatrix Lestrange, her husband Rodolphus, Rabaston Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr. They tortured the Longbottoms using the Cruciator's Curse, trying to extract the Dark Lord's whereabouts, even though Voldemort was already gone. They did not stop until Frank and Alice's minds were broken. They were sent to St. Mungo's Hospital, where they would remain alive, but never themselves. Their son, Neville, was raised by his grandmother. The aftermath at Hogwarts. The war had ended, but Hogwarts carried the scars. The defense against the dark arts post remained cursed. No professor would last more than a year. Some families refused to speak of Voldemort at all. Others denied he had ever existed. Many children grew up with the name Harry Potter whispered like a legend. But Harry himself knew nothing. He lived at number 4, Privet Drive, with the Dursleys, Vernon, Petunia, and their son Dudley. They hated magic. They hated Lily. And by extension, they hated Harry. They never told him the truth. They gave him a cupboard, not a bedroom. They gave him silence, not love. But the blood magic Dumbledore had sealed into Harry, born from Lily's sacrifice, protected him as long as he called that house home. The quiet years. Voldemort was not dead. His body destroyed, his soul fragments hidden in cursed objects, he survived as a wraith, clinging to life in the forests of Albania. He was less than a ghost, unable to possess magical bodies, feeding off snakes and fear. But he waited. And in the wizarding world, others waited too. Dumbledore, ever watchful, searched for clues to Voldemort's immortality. Snape, now teaching potions at Hogwarts, protected the boy he once doomed. Hagrid, keeper of keys and secrets, whispered stories to owls and half-giants. Minerva McGonagall, sharp and steady, watched every child sorted into her house. And the sorting hat. That ancient thing. It waited too. It had once placed Tom Riddle in Slytherin. Now it would meet the boy with the lightning scar. And it would wonder if this one, too, would break the world. The board was set. The players were in motion. The prophecy had been spoken. The scar had been given. The child had survived. And the quiet before the storm was nearly over. The world had already changed. It just hadn't told Harry Potter yet. For 11 years, he had lived not as a hero, or a symbol, or even a child, but as an inconvenience. At number 4, Privet Drive, Harry was a name spoken in irritation, never affection. The Dursleys, Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and their son Dudley, ensured he knew his place. That place was a cupboard under the stairs. It smelled of dust, spiders, and disinterest. His pillow was thin. His shirts were Dudley's old ones, stretched and stained. He was told he was lucky to be fed. He believed it. He didn't know why strange things happened around him, like hair that grew back overnight, glass that vanished from snake enclosures, or clothes that shrank after Dudley tried them on. He just knew he was unnatural. That's what. At the cupboard under the stairs 4, Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. No one outside the Dursley family had ever written to Harry. No one knew he existed, let alone where he slept. But someone knew. The castle knew. It had remembered the name the moment he was born. It had waited. It had watched. And now, it was calling him home. The Dursleys panic. Uncle Vernon burned the first letter. The next day, 2 arrived. He burned those 2. Then 4. Then 12. They came through the letterbox, the fireplace, the cracks under the door. Dozens. Then hundreds. One even flew down the chimney and smacked Vernon in the face. So he ran. He packed up the family and drove through the night, across motorways, moors, and fog. He rented a broken shack on a rock in the sea, far from post boxes, clocks, or calendars. It was July 30th. And at midnight, Harry would turn 11. The knock at the door. The storm raged outside. The shack creaked. Dudley snored. Harry drew a shape in the dust. A birthday cake with 1 candle. Then came a knock. A low, thunderous knock. Like a tree rapping on the door with its fist. When the door burst open, the sea wind howled, and in its place stood a giant. Wild black beard. Hair like a curtain of moss. Eyes crinkled with warmth. "Sorry about that," he said. "Should have knocked a bit gentler." His name was Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. And he had come to deliver a letter. The real one. The truth revealed. Vernon tried to stop him. Petunia screamed about that woman, Lily, and how she had been freakish. But Hagrid ignored them. He handed Harry the envelope. And for the first time in his life, Harry learned who he was. "You're a wizard, Harry. Not a freak. Not a burden. A wizard. With a place in a school older than nations. A vault in a bank guarded by goblins. A wand waiting to choose him. And a name spoken in reverence by people he'd never met. Diagon Alley, the magical world opens." The next day, Hagrid brought him to London, to Diagon Alley, hidden behind the leaky cauldron. With 3 taps of his pink umbrella, a brick wall unfolded into a cobbled street humming with life. Harry saw owls of every breed. Robes in colors he didn't know names for. Cauldrons stacked to the sky. Spellbooks with titles that whispered when opened. A shop that sold wands, and one that would change his life. Gringotts, the wizarding bank, held a vault in Harry's name, left to him by his parents. And deep in a second vault, Hagrid retrieved a small, wrapped package, the Philosopher's Stone, though Harry wouldn't know it yet. Then came Ollivander's. The wand chooses the wizard. Inside the narrow wand shop, surrounded by towers of boxes, Harry met Mr. Ollivander, pale, eerie, and impossibly old. "Every wand has a core, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and the heartstrings of dragons." Harry tried wand after wand. Nothing fit. Then he held a wand of holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, supple. Sparks exploded from its tip. Warmth spread up his arm. And Ollivander grew still. Curious, very curious. That wand's core comes from the tail feather of a phoenix that gave just 1 other feather. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. The brother wand. The wand that chose Voldemort. The moment was quiet, but heavy. 2 destinies, already tangled. The train to Hogwarts. September 1st arrived. At King's Cross Station, Harry stood before a barrier between platforms 9 and 10, unsure, until a red-haired family showed him how to run through the wall. He stepped onto platform 9 3/4 and saw the scarlet steam engine of the Hogwarts Express waiting. He met Ron Weasley, freckled and kind. Hermione Granger, brilliant and eager. Neville, already searching for his toad. Draco Malfoy, already drawing lines between blood and name. And at last, he saw the castle. Hogwarts. Lit against the black lake, Hogwarts rose like a dream out of stone. Its towers reached the stars. Its windows glowed with candlelight. Its staircases shifted like thoughts. And Harry, for the first time in his life, felt like he was home. He had no idea of the trials to come. The Mirror of Erised. The return of Voldemort. The truth about his parents. The burden of the prophecy. But in that moment, he was just a boy with a trunk, a wand, and a wide-eyed heart. And the magic had begun again. When Harry Potter first stepped through the doors of Hogwarts Castle, the castle felt it. Its enchanted stone warmed with ancient memory, not just of the boy who lived, but of every footstep that came before. It remembered Lily's laughter echoing through the corridors, James's mischief dashing down secret passageways, and even darker things, shadows beneath the dungeons, whispers in the chamber that had not spoken in 50 years. Harry didn't feel any of that, not yet. He was too overwhelmed by the floating candles, the enchanted ceiling that mirrored the stars above, and the full long tables buzzing with students in robes and scarves. He was too nervous about where he'd be sorted, or if he truly belonged at all. The sorting hat was older than the castle's towers and just as full of secrets. When it was placed on Harry's head, it immediately sensed something curious. There was power in him, and ambition too, something deep and sharp, inherited perhaps from the same magic that had once lived in another boy sorted long ago into Slytherin. The hat saw it, acknowledged it, and offered him that same path. But Harry whispered, again and again, not Slytherin. And the hat, though amused, respected his choice. It shouted, Gryffindor, and the castle exhaled. Settling into Hogwarts was like waking up inside a dream. There were ghosts at breakfast, staircases that moved when they felt like it, portraits that muttered advice or insults, and classes where feathers danced or teacups exploded. In Charms, Professor Flitwick nearly fell off his stack of books from excitement. In Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall turned her desk into a pig. But Potions was different. Professor Snape, pale, sharp-eyed, and cold, singled Harry out from the very first lesson. He asked questions not meant to be answered. He spoke Harry's name like a bruise. What Harry didn't know was that Snape had looked into his mother's eyes that morning and seen Lily again, and buried it under bitterness and guilt. Still, Hogwarts gave Harry more than magic. It gave him Ron Weasley, who shared his food and his fears. It gave him Hermione Granger, who at first annoyed him and then, almost by accident, became his fiercest ally. It gave him Hagrid, who had once handed him a birthday cake and still smelled of dragon smoke and wild kindness. And slowly, quietly, it gave him purpose. Strange things were happening. Harry noticed a trapdoor on the forbidden third-floor corridor, guarded by a massive three-headed dog. He remembered Hagrid's words about retrieving something from a vault in Gringotts, a vault emptied the very day someone tried to rob it. Then there was the troll that wandered into the school during Halloween. Snape's leg was injured that night, and Harry began to suspect he was hiding something. The name Nicholas Flamel appeared again and again, like a thread half visible in a tapestry. Eventually, it was Hermione, with her brilliant eyes and endless reading, who uncovered the truth. Flamel was an alchemist, over 600 years old, and the creator of the Philosopher's Stone, an object that could turn metal into gold and produce the elixir of life, the secret to immortality. The stone had been the object in the vault. It had been moved to Hogwarts. And someone wanted it. Harry believed it was Snape. He saw him muttering spells at a Quidditch match. He watched the shadows around him twist. But Snape, though cruel, was not the villain. The truth was quieter, more terrible. It was Professor Quirrell, the timid man in the stuttering voice and large purple turban. A man who had traveled to the forests of Albania and returned with something else inside him. Voldemort. Not reborn, not yet, but attached like a parasite to the back of Quirrell's head. Weak, hungry, and desperate. Surviving on unicorn blood and waiting for the stone. Harry met this darkness early, though he didn't understand it. In the Forbidden Forest, during a detention, he saw a cloaked figure drinking from the wound of a dying unicorn. The air around it chilled. His scar burned. The centaur spoke of balance, of fate, of planets aligned, and of a boy being hunted by something too old to die. Everything began to tighten. The trapdoor. The stone. The danger. The trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, began to unravel the protections placed beneath the school by the professors. Hagrid, innocently, had told a stranger how to calm Fluffy with music. That stranger had been Quirrell. And so, on one final night, they passed through the trapdoor, Fluffy sleeping to the sound of a harp, and descended into the depths. They faced trials, devil's snare, flying keys, a giant wizard's chessboard. Ron was injured. Hermione stayed back. Harry moved on alone. He found Quirrell. And Voldemort. Quirrell removed his turban, revealing a face on the back of his head, pale, serpent-like, with red eyes and a voice like poison. He offered Harry promises. Family. Power. Survival. All Harry had to do was give him the stone, which had already found its way into Harry's pocket, placed there by Dumbledore's enchantments, retrievable only by someone who wanted to find it, but not use it. Harry refused. When Quirrell touched him, his skin burned. Lily's protection, sealed into Harry's very blood, turned Voldemort's host to ash. Quirrell died screaming. Voldemort's soul fled, broken, screaming, again without form. Harry awoke in the hospital wing. Dumbledore was there. Calm, kind, tired. He told Harry some of the truth, not all. That Voldemort had survived. That love had saved him. That the stone would be destroyed, with Nicholas Flamel's blessing. That more questions would be answered, when Harry was ready. The school year ended with laughter and feast and last-minute house points awarded for bravery, cleverness, and kindness. Gryffindor won the House Cup. And Harry, once a boy who lived in a cupboard, returned to Privet Drive not as a prisoner, but as a wizard. With friends. With a wand. With a story just beginning. Because the stone was gone. But the war? The war was only just waking up again. By the time Harry returned to Privet Drive that summer, he was no longer a boy in the cupboard. He was a wizard. And he'd survived his first year at Hogwarts, trolls, potions, secret chambers, and a dark wizard trying to steal immortality. But the Dursleys hadn't changed. They locked up his wand, threw out his school books, and pretended Hogwarts didn't exist. It was as if the year had never happened. But magic does not forget. And neither does the castle. One evening, just before Harry's 12th birthday, he found a strange creature sitting on his bed, large ears, tennis ball eyes, and a voice like creaking floorboards. His name was Dobby, and he was a house elf. Dobby warned Harry not to return to Hogwarts. He spoke of terrible things. Of danger. Of a plot too old and too cruel to name. He wept into his pillowcase and banged his head against the wall. And when Harry refused to stay away, Dobby sabotaged everything. Including dropping a floating cake on a Muggle guest, which nearly got Harry expelled. Letters stopped coming. The Ministry was alerted. The Dursleys locked him in his room, bolted the windows, and fitted bars over them. But then, in the dead of night, a car flew through the sky. It was Ron Weasley and his brothers, Fred and George, in a bewitched Ford Anglia. They pulled off the bars, tied a rope to the bed, and rescued Harry from the Dursleys' grip. The Weasley home, or the burrow, was everything Privet Drive was not. Cozy, crooked, full of noise and magic. Mrs. Weasley's wand stirred saucepans by itself. Gnomes were flung from the garden. Letters arrived by owl. It was loud and warm and wonderfully alive. But Dobby's warning lingered, even as September 1st approached. At King's Cross, Harry and Ron tried to run through the barrier to platform 9 3/4, but it sealed. Blocked. No explanation. No passage. So they did something reckless. They stole the flying car. It soared over the countryside, invisible to muggles, mostly, and crash-landed into the Whomping Willow, one of Hogwarts' oldest and most temperamental trees. The car was nearly destroyed, the boys nearly expelled, and Snape nearly got his way. But Professor McGonagall, ever fair, spared them, and assigned detention instead. That night, the castle seemed different. The air hung heavier. The walls whispered. And it wasn't long before the first message appeared. Written in blood, smeared across a stone corridor, were the words: "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." Alongside the message hung the body of Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat, frozen stiff, eyes wide. No one knew what it meant. Most thought it was a prank. But Dumbledore's eyes darkened when he saw it. McGonagall paled. Snape narrowed his gaze and looked, very specifically, at Harry. The legend of the chamber spread quickly. It was said that Salazar Slytherin, before he left the school, had created a secret chamber within the castle, sealed it with Parseltongue, the language of snakes, and placed a monster inside. A monster only his heir could awaken. The professors dismissed it as a myth. The ghosts whispered otherwise. And the castle? The castle began to remember. Then another attack. And another. Students were found petrified, not dead, but frozen mid-scream, as if the light had been pulled from their eyes. Hermione took pages from the library, tore them out, and carried them in her hand until she, too, was found still as stone. The school panicked. Classes were cancelled. Curfews were enforced. Whispers turned to fear. And more eyes turned to Harry. Because Harry could speak Parseltongue. During a dueling club match, he had spoken to a snake, and everyone heard it. To Harry, it had sounded like English. To everyone else, it sounded like hissing, venomous syllables. Parseltongue was rare, feared, and, most damning of all, associated with Salazar Slytherin. The rumor spread, Harry is the heir. Even Ron hesitated. Even the portrait stared. Only Dumbledore seemed calm, and even he had begun leaving the office more often. The truth unraveled quietly. Hermione's torn page revealed the truth. The creature in the chamber was a basilisk, a massive serpent whose gaze could kill. Those petrified had not looked directly at it, which had saved their lives. And someone had been using it. Controlling it. The trail led to Moaning Myrtle, the ghost who haunted a forgotten bathroom. She had died 50 years ago, in that very bathroom, the last time the chamber was opened. She had seen yellow eyes before her death. She had been found next to a sink with a tiny serpent etched on its side. The entrance had been there the whole time. And the one opening it? Not a professor. Not a ghost. Not even a student in full control of themselves. It was Ginny Weasley. Unknowingly, unwillingly, she had been writing in a diary that whispered back. That listened. That told her secrets. The diary of Tom Riddle. A memory, preserved in ink, of the boy who would become Voldemort. Clever, manipulative, seductive. The diary possessed her, slowly at first, then fully, using her hands to open the chamber, control the basilisk, and write the messages in blood. When Harry discovered the truth, he descended into the chamber alone, past carved serpents, down into a cavern beneath the school. There, he found Ginny, pale and still, her life being drained by Tom's memory. The boy from the diary was becoming real. Tom Riddle revealed everything. He had been the one to open the chamber 50 years ago. He had framed Hagrid and his pet Acromantula. He had preserved part of his soul in the diary, a piece of himself. A Horcrux. Though Harry didn't know the word yet, he could feel the wrongness of it. The diary pulsed with life, with memory, with hate. Riddle called the basilisk. Harry fought it, nearly blind, armed only with a broken wand and Godric Gryffinder's sword, summoned to him by Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix. With the sword, he killed the serpent. Then, with a basilisk fang, he stabbed the diary. The ink screamed, and Tom Riddle vanished in a swirl of shadow and memory. Ginny awoke. The chamber fell silent. Back above, the school rejoiced. But Dumbledore, once again, looked tired. Harry told him everything. The diary, the memory, the voice in the walls. And Dumbledore, carefully, explained what Harry could not yet understand, that something darker had just been destroyed, and something far older had stirred. The diary had been more than a magical artifact. It had been a fragment of Voldemort's soul. It had been alive. Harry returned to the Gryffindor common room to applause, cake, and laughter. But he lay awake that night, listening to the fire crackle. Because he knew something now. He could speak Parseltongue. He had shared a wand core with Voldemort. He had faced a memory and seen its eyes in his own reflection. And though the chamber was closed, the war beneath it had only just begun. Summer had returned to Privet Drive, but nothing felt like it had truly settled. Harry Potter had survived a second year of magic, murder attempts, and a basilisk's fangs, but at home, he was still treated like a burden. The Dursleys ignored everything about Hogwarts, pretending magic didn't exist even when owls brought letters or his trunk buzzed faintly with residual spells. And then came Aunt Marge. She wasn't truly Harry's aunt, just a bitter woman with an opinion about everything and a voice like a saw on brick. When she insulted Harry's parents, called his father a drunk and his mother a mistake, something inside Harry snapped. He didn't reach for a wand. He didn't speak a word. But magic, raw and furious, erupted from him. Aunt Marge inflated like a balloon and floated to the ceiling. Harry ran. Grabbed his things. Fled into the night. He thought he was alone. But the shadows had teeth. A shape moved in the dark, a great black dog with eyes like a storm. A crack split the silence. Then, headlights. A violently purple triple-decker bus, screeching to a halt, the night bus. It whisked Harry away through the sleeping countryside, bouncing over hedges and squeezing between impossible alleys until it dropped him in Diagon Alley. There, to Harry's confusion, he was not arrested or expelled. Instead, he was met by Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic, who seemed more concerned with Harry's safety than his accidental magic. Because Sirius Black had escaped from Azkaban. And the wizarding world was terrified. Black was the first and only known person to ever escape the prison. He had been Voldemort's right hand, they said. Responsible for the deaths of 13 people in a single curse. A traitor. A madman. A murderer. And now, he was after Harry. Every wizard knew it. The papers said so. Even the Muggle Prime Minister had been informed. Dementors, the ghostly guards of Azkaban, were stationed at Hogwarts for protection, tall, hooded figures who sue. In new bloomed. Remus Lupin arrived as the new defense against the dark arts teacher, a pale, tired man with robes frayed at the cuffs and eyes that had seen too much. He was kind, gentle, and quietly brilliant. Lupin taught Harry how to face fear. Literally. With a boggart in the cupboard, Harry faced his worst nightmare, a Dementor. And later, Lupin would teach him one of the most difficult spells in all of magic. Expecto Patronum. A charm of light, hope, and memory. To conjure it, one had to reach for the happiest thought they'd ever known, something stronger than fear. Harry practiced again and again. Because he wanted to be ready. Because he wanted to fight back. But Sirius Black kept getting closer. He broke into the castle. Twice. Portraits were slashed. The fat lady fled her frame. Ron awoke to find a knife beside his bed. The whispers grew louder. The story resurfaced. 12 years ago, Sirius Black had been James Potter's best friend, the best man at his wedding, and Harry's godfather. It was Sirius who had betrayed them to Voldemort, and then murdered Peter Pettigrew, a fellow Order member, in a crowded street. Only a finger was found. Sirius laughed as they arrested him. The Dementors wanted to find him. And when they did, they would perform the kiss, a fate worse than death. It would suck out his soul, leaving him a hollow, breathing shell. Harry hated him. But then the story unraveled. With Hermione's help, and her secret use of a time-turner to attend multiple classes, they discovered the truth. Sirius Black was not the traitor. The real betrayer, the true murderer, was Peter Pettigrew, the man everyone thought had died. He had been disguised as Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, for 12 years. In the Shrieking Shack, hidden in Hogsmeade, everything came to light. Sirius had never betrayed the Potters. He had been their secret keeper, but switched at the last moment with Peter, hoping to throw off Voldemort. Peter had revealed their location. Peter had killed the Muggles. And Sirius had gone mad with grief, not guilt. Lupin was there too, and Harry learned they had all once been close: James, Sirius, Lupin, and Peter. They were the Marauders, the creators of the enchanted map that bore the names Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. Moony was Lupin, the werewolf. Wormtail, the rat, Pettigrew. Padfoot, the dog, Sirius. Prongs, the stag, James. They had roamed Hogwarts as boys, wild and loyal. And when the truth came out, Sirius, still gaunt and broken from Azkaban, looked at Harry not with the face of a murderer, but of a man who had lost everything except hope. He asked Harry if he wanted to live with him. Harry said yes. But it didn't last. Pettigrew escaped. The full moon rose. Lupin transformed into a beast and ran wild through the forest. The Dementors caught them all. Harry, weak and near death, saw a stag of pure light, his patroness, charge the Dementors away. But when he looked to the lake, he thought he saw his father. Only later did he realize it had been himself. A time loop. A paradox. He had saved himself. But still. Sirius was captured. Sentenced to the kiss. So Harry and Hermione turned back time, 3 turns of the hourglass, and changed the past. They freed Buckbeak, Hagrid's hippogriff, who had been sentenced to death. They soared into the night sky. And with moments to spare, they freed Sirius. The world never knew. The Ministry still believed Sirius was guilty. But Harry knew the truth. And when the year ended, and the train pulled away from the castle, Harry had no parents, no godfather he could live with, no public victory. But he had truth. He had hope. And most importantly, he had begun to see that the past was not a story carved in stone. It was a map. And he had just begun to follow its path. The summer before 4th year began with a flicker of excitement. For once, Harry was not at Privet Drive for long. He had been invited to the Quidditch World Cup by the Weasleys, an enormous magical event that would see tens of thousands of wizards from across the globe come together to watch Ireland face Bulgaria. There were tents with rooms larger than mansions, enchanted snacks, and fireworks that spelled team names in the sky. It felt like magic was everything it was meant to be: fun, wild, free. But the illusion shattered in one night. After the match, as families slept and fans celebrated, the sky turned green. The dark mark appeared. That skull with a serpent twisting from its mouth, the symbol of Voldemort, burned above the tents. Panic spread. Death Eaters in black masks stormed the grounds, cursing, taunting, and terrorizing Muggles. It was a reminder that the past had not died. It had simply been waiting. And in the chaos, a house elf named Winky, bound to the Crouch family, was found with a wand. The spell that had cast the dark mark came from that wand. No one knew how. But someone had used the confusion to make a declaration: he is coming back. Back at Hogwarts, everything was different. Dumbledore made an announcement. For the first time in over a century, Hogwarts would host the Tri-Wizard Tournament, a legendary contest between 3 wizarding schools: Beauxbatons, from France, Durmstrang, from the north, and Hogwarts itself. It was meant to foster unity. What it fostered was something else entirely. Each school would select one champion through the Goblet of Fire, a magical artifact that would judge based on merit, courage, and skill. The age limit was raised to 17 to prevent younger students from entering. From Beauxbatons came 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, graceful and proud. From Durmstrang, Victor Crumb, already a famous Quidditch star. And from Hogwarts, Cedric Diggory. Hufflepuff's best, fair and noble. 3 champions. Then the goblet flared again. A 4th name. Harry Potter. The world gasped. Harry hadn't entered his name. He was underage. The rules were unbreakable. But the goblet had accepted him. It was binding. He had no choice but to compete. The whispers began again. Some thought Harry had cheated. Others thought Dumbledore had helped him. Even Ron, for a time, doubted him. But someone had rigged the goblet. And they'd done it with purpose. The tasks began. The first task was dragons. Each champion had to retrieve a golden egg guarded by a fully grown, fire-breathing dragon. Harry drew the Hungarian Horntail, the most dangerous of all. He summoned his broom, Accio Firebolt, and flew. He darted, dodged, soared past talons and flame, and claimed the egg. The crowd roared. Even Ron apologized. The egg held a clue, but it only screamed when opened. It wasn't until Myrtle, the ghost from the bathroom, pointed Harry to the bathtub that he understood. Underwater. A song. A warning. The second task was in the Black Lake. Each champion had to rescue something valuable to them from the depths. The merpeople guarded the captives, Ron, Hermione, Fleur's sister, and Cho Chang. Harry found them all. But when Fleur didn't arrive, he refused to leave her sister behind. He delayed his return, risking the task. He lost points, but gained something deeper. Even the merpeople called him noble. Throughout the year, something else stirred. Mad-Eye Moody, the new defense against the dark arts teacher, taught them spells no other teacher had dared to, unforgivable curses. He showed them how to resist the Imperious Curse, how to spot deceit, how to survive. He seemed odd. Constantly sipping from a flask. Always watching. But brilliant. Fiercely protective. He turned Harry into a fighter. And yet, something about him felt off. The third task was a maze. Not just hedges, but enchantments. Traps. Creatures. The champions entered from 4 corners, racing toward the Triwizard Cup in the center. Inside the maze, Harry and Cedric found themselves fighting not each other, but everything else. Blast-ended Scroots. Bogarts. An enchanted mist that reversed direction. In the final stretch, they reached the cup together. And Harry said, "Take it with me." A Hogwarts victory. Both of us. They touched it. And the cup became a portkey. They landed in a graveyard. A figure was waiting. Peter Pettigrew. A baby-like creature was cradled in his arms, weak, skeletal, and barely alive. But it was Voldemort. And with ancient, unspeakable magic, he returned. Bone of the father, unknowingly given. Flesh of the servant, willingly sacrificed. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. Harry was bound. Cedric was murdered, killed a spare, in a flash of green light. Voldemort rose, reborn in full form. Snake-faced. Red-eyed. Whole again. The Death Eaters returned. He called them friends. Most had hidden after his fall. Now they bowed once more. He challenged Harry. A duel. Wands raised. Curses fired. But their wands shared a twin core, a phoenix feather from the same bird. The spells collided. And something impossible happened. Priori incantatum. The wands locked. A golden thread connected them. Ghostly echoes emerged from Voldemort's wand, Cedric. Frank Bryce. Bertha Jorkins. And last, Lily and James Potter. They spoke to Harry. They told him to run. He broke the connection, grabbed the portkey, took Cedric's body, and returned. Back at Hogwarts, he collapsed. He screamed his back. The world refused to listen. The Ministry denied it. Cornelius Fudge refused to believe Voldemort had returned. Dumbledore declared it openly. And the war began again, not with a spell, but with a lie. The man Harry thought was Mad-Eye Moody was not. The real Moody had been locked in a trunk all year. The imposter was Barty Crouch Jr., a Death Eater in disguise, who had fed Harry guidance all year to ensure he touched the cup. Harry had been led, groomed, used, and yet he had survived. Cedric had not. The end-of-year feast was somber. The house cup was irrelevant. The gold decorations dimmed. Dumbledore rose and told them all, remember Cedric Diggory, a boy who was kind and brave and true. Harry returned to Privet Drive carrying the weight of a prophecy he hadn't yet heard, a war that had just begun, and a truth only a few believed. The Dark Lord had risen again. When Harry returned to Privet Drive after the graveyard, he was not the same boy who had left. Cedric Diggory was dead. Voldemort had returned. And no one believed him. He waited for word, any word, from Dumbledore. From Ron. From Hermione. Days passed. Then weeks. Nothing came. He began to wonder if even his friends had abandoned him. Until, one night, the silence broke. A group of witches and wizards appeared in the sky above Privet Drive, flying broomsticks in a protective formation. Among them were familiar faces, Mad-Eye Moody, Remus Lupin, and Tonks, with her pink hair and crooked grin. They were part of something old, something reborn, the Order of the Phoenix. A secret group founded by Dumbledore, sworn to fight Voldemort, working in the shadows once more. They brought Harry to their new headquarters, number 12, Grimmauld Place, hidden behind Muggle houses in London, invisible to all but those who knew its name. The house belonged to Sirius Black. Cold, dark, and soaked in pure blood arrogance, it bore the marks of the Black family's beliefs. Tapestries of ancestors who supported Voldemort. A portrait of Sirius's screaming mother. House elves who muttered in the dark. It was not a home, it was a curse with windows. But it was safe. And it was filled with war. The Order held meetings behind closed doors. Harry was kept out. Too young, they said. But he knew something was coming. At Hogwarts, things were worse. The Ministry of Magic, terrified of panic, had begun a campaign of denial. Cornelius Fudge accused Dumbledore of lying, of trying to take his position. And so he planted a ministry official at the heart of the school. Her name was Dolores Umbridge. She wore pink, smiled constantly, and inflicted cruelty with a calm, deliberate hand. She taught no magic, punished dissent, carved words into skin with a blood quill. I must not tell lies. That was her lesson. She rose quickly. From teacher to High Inquisitor. From Inquisitor to Headmistress. She fired professors, banned clubs, removed Hagrid, and turned Hogwarts into something worse than broken. It became silent. But magic resists silence. Harry, angry and restless, began to fight back. With Hermione's help, he founded Dumbledore's army. A secret group of students who met in the Room of Requirement, a chamber that appeared only to those who truly needed it. They practiced spells in secret. Harry taught them Expelliarmus, Stupefy, Protego. Neville learned to duel. Luna Lovegood joined, dreamy-eyed and brave. Ginny Weasley proved she could fight alongside anyone. They weren't soldiers, not yet. But they were learning. And Harry was teaching. Then the visions began. At night, Harry dreamed not as himself, but as Voldemort, his snake-like thoughts slithering into Harry's mind. He saw things before they happened, a bite, a scream, a corridor of doors in the Department of Mysteries. Dumbledore noticed. But he pulled away, kept his distance. Not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid. Afraid of connection. Afraid of possession. Afraid that Voldemort, through Harry, might reach him. So Dumbledore vanished behind silence. And Harry, once more, felt abandoned. The worst vision came just before Christmas. Harry saw Arthur Weasley attacked by a snake, Nagini, Voldemort's familiar. He saw it through the snake's eyes, felt the fangs pierce flesh. The order arrived just in time to save Arthur. But the truth was now clear. Harry's mind was a door. And Voldemort was knocking. To guard his thoughts, Dumbledore ordered that he be taught occlumency, the magical art of closing the mind. But the task fell to Severus Snape. The lessons were bitter, harsh, and full of resentment. Snape tore into Harry's mind, exposed his memories, pushed him too hard. Harry couldn't master it. His mind remained open. And Voldemort walked through. One night, the vision came sharp and vivid. Sirius, tortured, trapped in the Department of Mysteries. Harry couldn't ignore it. He raced to the Ministry with Ron, Hermione, Neville, Luna, and Ginny. They flew on thestrals, skeletal winged horses only visible to those who had seen death. They entered the Hall of Prophecies. Inside, they found a glowing orb. On it, Harry's name. And Voldemort's. But it was a trap. Death Eaters emerged from the shadows, Lucius Malfoy, Bellatrix Lestrange, and others. They wanted the prophecy. It contained the truth Voldemort feared. The truth about why Harry lived. The students fought. Wands sparked. Shelves collapsed. Spells flew. They held their own, but just barely. Then the order arrived. Sirius. Lupin. Kingsley. Tonks. Moody. The duel that followed cracked the air. And then Bellatrix's curse struck Sirius. He fell. Through a stone archway veiled in mist. Gone. No body. No goodbye. Just silence. Harry screamed. He chased her. He cast the Cruciator's curse, and it worked, weakly, but it worked. Voldemort appeared. The prophecy smashed. And in that final moment, Harry was possessed. His body ached, his vision blurred. He felt Voldemort inside him. But then he thought of Sirius. Of love. Of grief. And Voldemort could not stay. Dumbledore arrived. Dueled Voldemort. Shattered the Ministry atrium. The wizarding world finally saw. Fudge arrived. Saw Voldemort. And could no longer deny. The war was real. Later, Dumbledore told Harry the truth. Why he had distanced himself. Why Voldemort had tried to kill him. Why Harry's life had been shaped from birth. Because of the prophecy. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. Voldemort marked Harry as his equal. Harry had been chosen. Not by the prophecy, but by Voldemort's choice. And so, the war was no longer between armies. It was between two souls. And only one could live. Harry left Grimmauld Place a different boy. Older. Quieter. Grieving. He had lost his godfather. He had found his enemy. He had glimpsed the path ahead. And he was walking toward it, step by step. The wizarding world no longer pretended. Voldemort had returned. Death Eaters moved openly. Muggles were dying. The Ministry, late to act, scrambled for control. Posters warned of disappearances. Witches clutched children's hands tightly in Diagon Alley. Gringotts closed early. Even Hogwarts, once untouchable, began to feel the war knocking at its doors. But in the quiet between attacks, life tried to continue. Harry spent the summer with the Weasleys at the Burrow, joined by 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, now engaged to Bill Weasley. Mrs. Weasley didn't hide her disapproval, nor did Ginny. But Fleur remained, unbothered, her eyes always calm. Harry had changed too. He didn't laugh as easily. His eyes darted to the sky more often. He knew now that he was the target, that the end wouldn't come in some distant future. It had already begun. Dumbledore returned at last. And when he came, it was not with gentle words, but with a mission. He arrived at Privet Drive himself, charming the Dursleys into silence, and took Harry somewhere unexpected. To persuade an old potions professor, Horace Slughorn, to return to Hogwarts. Slughorn, rotund and charming, collected powerful students like trophies. Dumbledore wanted him back for a reason Harry didn't yet understand. And Slughorn agreed, enticed by fame, flattery, and the unspoken war. Back at Hogwarts, everything shimmered with both change and fear. Dumbledore was more present than ever, yet more secretive. He gave Harry private lessons, but not in spells. He taught him Voldemort's past. They peered into memories, stored in the pensive, unraveling the life of Tom Marvolo Riddle. A boy born from a love potion, abandoned in a Muggle orphanage, who charmed teachers but tortured orphans. Who learned to lie beautifully, to collect followers, to hide in plain sight. They watched him manipulate, steal, murder, and divide his soul. That was the key. Horcruxes. Dark magic that allowed a wizard to anchor fragments of the soul into objects, rendering them immortal unless every piece was destroyed. Dumbledore suspected that Voldemort had made 7. One was Tom Riddle's diary, destroyed in the Chamber of Secrets. Another, Marvolo Gaunt's ring, Dumbledore had already found and destroyed. But they needed more answers. And Slughorn held the memory that would reveal the truth. Harry tried everything to retrieve it. Flattery. Please. Nothing worked. Then came luck, or what he thought was luck. Slughorn returned to teaching potions, and since Snape had finally become defense against the dark arts professor, Harry found himself back in potions class. He didn't expect to enjoy it. But the cupboard held a second-hand textbook. It was filled with notes. Corrections. Spells scribbled in the margins. Some more effective, some more dangerous. One of them was called Sectum Sempra, a spell that slashed as if by blade. The book was signed, not with a name, but with a title. This book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. Harry excelled in potions. He used the prince's spells and shortcuts. He brewed a perfect draught of living death. And he won a vial of Felix Felicis, liquid luck. He used that potion, not for Hogwarts. Draco Malfoy was different, pale, anxious, slipping away between classes, vanishing from the Marauders map. Harry knew he was up to something. But no one believed him. Not Ron. Not Hermione. Not even Dumbledore. Malfoy had been tasked with something. Harry knew it in his bones. The truth was worse than anyone guessed. Dumbledore had located another Horcrux, a locket once belonging to Salazar Slytherin, hidden in a cave protected by ancient magic. And he asked Harry to come with him. Together, they apparat to the shore of a black lake. They crossed the water on a boat drawn by blood magic. In the center, a basin filled with a glowing potion. Dumbledore drank it, despite the pain. Each sip burned. He screamed. Begged for death. Harry forced him to drink it all. Inside was the locket. Infri, corpses enchanted to move, rose from the lake, clawing, hissing. Harry fought them off with fire. They barely escaped. When they returned to Hogwarts, Dumbledore was weak, barely standing. They landed atop the astronomy tower. And there, Draco Malfoy waited. Draco disarmed Dumbledore. He had been tasked by Voldemort to kill him, a punishment for Lucius's failure at the Ministry. Draco had repaired the vanishing cabinet, creating a passage from Borgin and Berks into Hogwarts. Through it came Death Eaters. But Draco couldn't do it. He trembled. Wand raised. Tears in his eyes. Then, another voice. Severus Snape. He raised his wand. Dumbledore looked at him. Severus, please. And Snape cast the killing curse. Green light. A fall. Silence. Dumbledore was dead. Hogwarts screamed. The sky split with the dark mark. The Death Eaters fled. Snape vanished into the night. And Harry stood over the body of the only man who had ever had the full truth. Later, when Harry opened the locket, he found it was a fake. Inside, a note. I have stolen the real Horcrux in the hope that when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more. R.A.B. The locket was gone. Dumbledore was gone. And Voldemort was growing stronger every hour. At the funeral, the whole wizarding world gathered. Merfolk sang from the lake. Centaurs stood in the trees. Fawkes the Phoenix cried once, and flew away. Harry decided, then, not to return to school. The war had begun. The hunt for Horcruxes would not wait. He would go with Ron. With Hermione. They would finish what Dumbledore started. Because Dumbledore had never asked Harry to be a hero. He had asked him to remember. And Harry would. The train did not leave for Hogwarts that year. Instead, Harry left the burrow with Ron and Hermione, armed not with maps or professors, but with fragments of memory and Dumbledore's final, unfinished plan. He had no instructions, only 3 tasks. Find the remaining Horcruxes. Destroy them. Survive. But the world had changed. The Ministry had fallen. The Death Eaters had infiltrated it from within. The Muggle-born Registration Commission began targeting wizards without wizarding ancestry. Mudblood was spoken openly. Families vanished. Children went into hiding. Fear wore official robes. And at the top, Voldemort. He now held the Elder Wand, stolen from Dumbledore's tomb. One of the 3 deathly Hallows. The most powerful wand ever made. But before that truth was known, the trio vanished into the wild. Camping across England, invisible, moving every few days, they hunted Horcruxes with no guide, no instruction, just scattered clues and an old copy of the tales of Beedle the Bard. They argued. They froze. They starved. They nearly lost each other. From the ruins of Godric's Hollow, where Harry visited his parents' grave, to the silver-frosted river where Ron left in fury and grief, to the shadow of 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, possessed by Nagini in a house that once held books and memories. The journey broke them. And rebuilt them, slowly. It was Hermione who deciphered the riddle. In the children's tale of the 3 brothers, she found something real. 3 gifts from Death himself. The Elder Wand, invincible in battle. The Resurrection Stone, which calls the dead. The Invisibility Cloak, perfect and enduring. The Hallows. Harry realized he already had one. His cloak. Voldemort now had another. The wand. The third was hidden, but soon to return. Then came Ron's return. Guided by the Deluminator Dumbledore left him, Ron saved Harry from drowning under the weight of a Horcrux that dragged him into ice and memory. Together, they destroyed it, with the sword of Gryffindor, revealed to them by the lake. The sword, goblin-made, absorbed what it destroyed. It would kill Horcruxes. One by one, they were found. The locket, stolen and worn until it whispered lies into their ears. Destroyed by Ron. The cup of Helga Hufflepuff, locked in the depths of Gringotts. Stolen atop a dragon's back. The diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw, hidden in the Room of Requirement. Each destruction came at a cost. But the greatest cost would come at Hogwarts. For it was there, in the castle's very stones, that the final stand would be made. The trio returned. The professors rose to defend them. The order arrived. Students stood with wands raised. And the Battle of Hogwarts began. Trolls in the corridors. Spells crackling like lightning. The statues of Hogwarts awoken by McGonagall's command. Ghosts screamed. Giants thundered. Walls fell. Fred Weasley died in an explosion. Tonks and Lupin lay together in the Great Hall. Colin Creevey, camera shattered, did not wake again. And in the Forbidden Forest, Voldemort waited. Harry, learning that he himself was a Horcrux, understood what had to be done. He walked into the forest alone, leaving no note, no plea. Just acceptance. In his hand, the golden snitch opened. I open at the close. Inside, the resurrection stone. He saw his parents. Sirius. Lupin. They walked with him to the edge. Then he faced Voldemort, unarmed. And died. But death did not claim him. He awoke in a space between life and death, a bright, misty King's Cross station. There, Dumbledore met him once more. He explained Voldemort had killed the piece of himself within Harry, not Harry's soul. Because of Lily's sacrifice, Harry had always been protected. Because Voldemort used Harry's blood, he tethered Harry to life. Harry could return. And he did. He did not run. He fought. Back at Hogwarts, Neville Longbottom, loyal, brave, and fierce, drew the sword of Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat and beheaded Nagini, the final Horcrux. Voldemort was now mortal. In the final duel, Harry stood tall. He revealed the truth. The wand belongs to me. It never belonged to you. Because Draco Malfoy had disarmed Dumbledore on the tower. And Harry had disarmed Draco. The Elder Wand was loyal to Harry. The final spell, the Expelliarmus. Voldemort's own curse rebounded. He fell. Empty. Ordinary. Gone. Afterwards, Harry broke the Elder Wand in half and threw it away. He did not want to rule. He wanted peace. And peace came. Years later, Harry stood on platform 9 3/4 with Ginny, watching their son, Albus Severus Potter, prepare to board the Hogwarts Express. He told him, "You're named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin. And he was the bravest man I ever knew." The scar on Harry's forehead had not hurt in 19 years. All was well. The morning after the battle dawned too bright. Sunlight touched the scorched stones of Hogwarts, creeping through shattered windows and over broken benches. Where just hours ago spells had cracked the sky and giants shook the earth, now there was only birdsong and silence. The dead were counted. No magic could soften that. Fred. Tonks. Lupin. Colin. So many names. So many lost. But they had one. And so the wizarding world had to ask, what now? The first thing to change was the Ministry of Magic. The old minister, Pius Thickness, a puppet under the Imperious Curse, was removed immediately. Many others had fled or been exposed for their cowardice. Kingsley Shacklebolt, a calm, brilliant aura and member of the Order, was named interim minister. Under Kingsley, the ministry did something it hadn't done in decades, it listened. The Muggle-born Registration Commission was dismantled. Those imprisoned unjustly were freed. Azkaban's Dementors were driven away, not with war, but with policy. Kingsley refused to let fear rule any longer. Death Eaters who survived were hunted down. Many, like Dolohov and Roll, were captured and tried. Others vanished into the shadows. But not all were punished. Draco Malfoy, for instance, was spared prison. It was noted that he had not killed Dumbledore when given the chance, and that, in the end, he had not fought for Voldemort, but for his mother and father. Some thought this mercy foolish. Others thought it wise. As for Lucius and Narcissa, they were left to live quietly in their manor, reputation shattered, the gold in their vaults now a heavy silence. Hogwarts reopened the next year. The castle had been damaged, yes, but she was stubborn. The magic in her stones remembered every spell cast in defense, and she let herself be rebuilt. Professor McGonagall became headmistress. She took to the role with firm kindness, hiring new staff, restoring order, and even letting some traditions rest. House points felt smaller after war. Rivalry faded into friendship. Many who had once sneered at Muggleborns now shared textbooks. Battle earned respect outshining blood. Neville Longbottom returned, not as a student, but later as the new herbology professor. He kept a gnarled piece of the Whomping Willow in his office, and students said the greenhouses always felt safer with him nearby. And what of Harry? He did not return for his final year. He had had enough of classrooms and corridors for now. Instead, he joined the Aura department under Kingsley's reform. So did Ron, and together they worked to track down remaining dark wizards. There's a note here, a small one, but real. Canon tells us that Harry and Ron never finished their NEWTS. But the world trusted them anyway. Hermione, of course, did return to Hogwarts, because Hermione would not rest until every exam was completed. She later joined the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, where she fought for the rights of house elves, centaurs, and goblins alike. Later still, she would rise. Far higher than most expected. In the years that followed, change came like spring after a long winter. Werewolf rights were improved, thanks in part to the memory of Remus Lupin. House elf protections gained traction, though slowly. Muggle studies became required for a time, because ignorance, as history had proved, was dangerous. And above all, truth was no longer a secret. The wizarding world remembered what it meant to hide too long. And so they spoke of the Battle of Hogwarts. Of Dumbledore's mistakes. Of Snape's sacrifice. Of the names etched into the memorial near the gates of the school. Because names, when spoken, are not forgotten. Now, some whisper of other stories, of Dudley Dursley eventually writing to Harry, awkward and fumbling, to say thank you. Of Gilderoy Lockhart, still signing autographs in St. Mungo's, still unaware he once taught at Hogwarts. And there are tales, unconfirmed, but never disproven, of Hogwarts ghosts growing quiet when children pass with the same eyes as the heroes who once walked their halls. Is all of this canon? Not exactly. But the world makes room for magic that isn't written. And sometimes, what isn't written still feels true. So ends the war. Not with a bang, but with rebuilding. With grief turned into gardens. With children returning to school under safe skies. With laughter in the Great Hall once more. And somewhere, maybe in a cupboard at the end of the corridor, the Sorting Hat rests, waiting for the next student to try it on, whispering, "You'll do fine, child. After all, you've got courage in your bones." Just like the rest of them. The platform is crowded, just as it always is on the 1st of September. Trolleys with trunks rattle over the bricks, owls hoot sleepily in their cages, and cats peer out from under scarves with dignified boredom. But one boy stands still. His name is Albus Severus Potter, and today is the day he boards the Hogwarts Express for the very first time. He is small for 11, a little thin, with his father's dark hair and his mother's steady eyes. His fingers are clenched on the handle of his trolley, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of expectation. Everyone knows his name. But no one knows him. He watches the red train breathe steam into the sky, and behind him, his father kneels. "Albus," says Harry, "you're named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was the bravest man I ever knew." The boy looks up at him, searching. "But what if I'm sorted into Slytherin?" And Harry leans closer, his voice quiet now, so only his son can hear. "Then Slytherin will have gained a great wizard." Canon tells us this moment happened exactly as I've told it now. It's written in the final pages of Deathly Hallows, and no magic can alter what's true. So Albus nods, still unsure, still frightened, but willing now to trust the rails beneath his feet. He boards the train. In the compartment, he sits beside a boy named Scorpius Malfoy, the son of Draco. Now, this is where the line between hard canon and whispered story begins to blur. We know that Albus and Scorpius became close. We know their friendship surprised many. That it was built not on rivalry, but recognition, each the shadow of a legacy they didn't ask for. That part is true. Some say their bond grew deep enough to challenge even the most storied friendships Hogwarts had ever seen. Others say they caused chaos in their own right, mild curses, broken clocks, unexpected time-turners. Some say they stumbled backward into history and forward into something that changed them. This is the part drawn from the stage play The Cursed Child. It is soft canon, official, but debated. Some wizards accept it into their shelves. Others leave it tucked behind their pensive, filed as possible. But here's what we do know, what is unarguably true. Hogwarts still stood. The Sorting Hat still sang. The castle still shifted her staircases when she felt like it. And children still made their way to her doors with eyes full of storm and starlight. Harry, Ginny, Ron, Hermione, they stood on the platform, watching the train pull away. There was no war left to fight. No prophecy to fear. Only time. Time to grow older. Time to forgive. Time to be ordinary. But the train, that was never ordinary. It carried a new generation into stories not yet told. And the castle waited for them, as it always had. With her torches lit. With her ghosts whispering. And with her heart, quietly hopeful. The train carried Albus Severus Potter into a castle built of legends, but he did not feel like a legend. He felt like a shadow. Not of evil. Not of greatness. But of expectation. Everywhere he walked, he heard the echoes, Potter. Harry's son. The boy who lived, his boy. But Albus didn't feel brave. He didn't feel chosen. And on the night of his sorting, when the sorting hat rested on his head, it paused, not for show, not for drama, but because it saw something deeper. It saw his fear. His doubt. And his quiet, flaring independence. Slytherin, it whispered. And so he went. And there was silence. For the first time in nearly a century, a Potter had not gone to Gryffindor. At his side, always, was Scorpius Malfoy. The only son of Draco, and the only student who did not look at Albus like a mirror or a prophecy. Scorpius, too, had grown up under whispers, darker ones. Whispers that perhaps he was not Draco's son at all, but something bred from time magic and fear. They called him Cursed. So the two of them, boy of war, boy of rumor, became a pair. Inseparable. Brilliant in their own quiet way. They did not seek out adventure like their parents once had. But adventure found them anyway. It began with a stolen object, as many stories do. A time-turner, illegal, unstable, thought to be destroyed. Albus overheard a conversation. A girl, Delphi, who claimed to be the niece of Amos Diggory, begged for a chance to save Cedric. To go back. To change the moment when Cedric died in the graveyard. Albus, aching to do something right, something meaningful, agreed. He and Scorpius stole the time-turner. And with it, they traveled backwards. The first jump was small. The second, disastrous. You've seen the great castle on the hill. You've ridden the train and walked the shifting staircases. You've stood in the Forbidden Forest and flown past the towers of Hogwarts. But magic isn't British. It never was. It's older than nations. Wider than seas. And it lives in corners of the world where English is never spoken and wands are carved from woods not found in Ollivanders. So now we'll wander. Quietly. Softly. Like travelers stepping into a market full of incense and whispers. We'll visit places where spells sound different, where magic wears a different face. There are 11 long-established wizarding schools in the world. Hogwarts is simply one. Far across the sea, in the cold forests of Scandinavia, stands 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 Institute, a castle older than even Hogwarts, hidden beneath perpetual snow. Their teaching is fierce, focused, and proud. Students wear fur-lined robes and study combat magic as early as their first year. Dark arts are not forbidden, but they are feared and understood. 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 once taught Grindelwald. That is canon. But not all its students follow his path. Some emerge strong and quiet, the snow of their homeland still clinging to their boots as they study peace through strength. South of there, in France, nestled somewhere near the Pyrenees, lies 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹's Academy of Magic. Its spires shimmer like blue glass. Magic here is gentle and precise, focused on charm, transfiguration, and beauty in all its forms. Many believe 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮's is all silk and grace. But that is an outsider's view. Within its walls are scholars of fierce discipline, artisans of enchantment, and potioneers who speak to their cauldrons like musicians to their strings. Madame Maxim, who once arrived at Hogwarts with carriage and winged horses, remains its head mistress. That is canon too. Cross the oceans now. To Japan, where a school named 𝓢𝓐𝓏𝓏𝓏𝓏 sits atop a mist-wreathed volcanic island. Its students arrive each day by enchanted storm petrel, flying from distant homes to the mountaintop. Robes begin pale pink, deepening with learning, until they shine gold in the final years. 𝓢𝓐𝓏𝓏𝓏 is known for Quidditch. Its flyers are swift, deliberate, silent in the wind. Some say their seeker training begins in infancy. That, perhaps, is exaggeration. But their skill is not. In Brazil, beneath the canopy of the Amazon rainforest, rises Castelo Bruxo, a temple-like structure of stone and moss. Protected by Caipora, small, fierce, jungle spirits, it teaches herbology and magizoology unlike anywhere else. Uniforms are bright green. Spells often borrow from indigenous enchantments. And yes, it's canon. In Africa, there is one wizarding school known across the continent, Wagadu, carved into the mountains of the moon. It is the 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 and her nomai, non-magical, husband. Its house system is different: thunderbird, wampus, horned serpent, pukwudgie. Its founder was raised with stories of Hogwarts, but built something new. A school that blended cultures, gave second chances, and grew into one of the great institutions of the modern magical world. Some say their sorting ceremony is louder than Hogwarts. Whether that's canon, or just rivalry, is up for debate. And then there are the places without schools, where magic is taught in family lines, oral traditions, and sacred scripts. In India, some wizards train under gurus in secret ashrams, combining ancient spellcraft with alchemical texts far older than the British ministry. In Australia, Wandless developed differently, more attuned to weather, desert stone, and ancestral spirits. In Egypt, spells have been passed down through tombs and papyri, guarded by wards older than Latin itself. These stories, some canon, some drawn from confirmed notes, remind us of something essential. Magic did not begin at Hogwarts. And it does not end there. So wherever a child is born beneath starlight, wherever a potion bubbles over fire, wherever someone whispers a word that makes the world shift, magic is watching. And waiting. And somewhere, perhaps even now, a new school prepares to open its doors. Because time is not a thread to be tugged gently. It is a tapestry. Pull at one corner, and the entire pattern shifts. They return to the present to find a world changed. Cedric had lived. But Ron and Hermione had never married. Their daughter Rose no longer existed. The future was fraying. So they went again. Another adjustment. Another failure. And then, the darkest world. One where Voldemort had won. Where Harry Potter had died in the Battle of Hogwarts. Where Muggleborns were hunted. where Professor Snape, still alive in that timeline, stood with Scorpius in quiet defiance, and fell, defending the faint memory of the boy he once protected. Scorpius, alone, managed to undo what they'd broken. He restored the world as it was. Barely. But Albus, he was no longer sure he should have tried at all. And Delphi? She was no niece. She was the daughter of Lord Voldemort and Bellatrix Lestrange, born in secret, raised to believe she would one day restore her father's name. She intended to rewrite time, not to save Cedric, but to ensure that the Dark Lord would never fall. She lured the boys into a final trap, into Godric's Hollow, on the eve of Harry's parents' death. Her plan: stop Voldemort from marking Harry. Let the prophecy remain unsaid. Let time bend toward darkness once more. But the boys sent a message, using Harry's old blanket, enchanted to burn words across time. Harry read it. Understood. Came for them. Alongside Ginny, Ron, Hermione, and Draco, they arrived not with fury, but with resolve. They stopped Delphi, not with curses, but by holding the line. The past was left untouched. The spell that ended Voldemort's soul was allowed to begin. And Harry watched his parents walk toward their deaths, unable to save them, knowing they had to die for him to live. It nearly undid him. But Albus was at his side. And somehow, that was enough. They returned to Hogwarts changed again, but this time, not lost. Not broken. Just older. Albus and Scorpius were still themselves. Still misfits. Still thoughtful. Still strange. But now, they were no longer trying to be anything else. And Harry, finally, stopped expecting his son to walk his path. "You're not alone, he said. And I'll try not to be either. Whether these events happen precisely as I've told them, that's a matter of belief. The official record exists, yes, but it was made for the stage, not the page. Some accept it. Others set it gently aside. But what is true, undeniably, beautifully true, is that the next generation did not live in fear. They made mistakes. They repaired them. And Hogwarts, ever timeless, continued to open her arms. You've seen the great castle on the hill. You've ridden the train, and walked the shifting staircases. You've stood in the Forbidden Forest and flown past the towers of Hogwarts. But magic isn't British. It never was. It's older than nations. Wider than seas. And it lives in corners of the world where English is never spoken and wands are carved from woods not found in Ollivanders. So now we'll wander. Quietly. Softly. Like travelers stepping into a market full of incense and whispers. We'll visit places where spells sound different, where magic wears a different face. There are 11 long-established wizarding schools in the world. Hogwarts is simply one. Far across the sea, in the cold forests of Scandinavia, stands 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 Institute, a castle older than even Hogwarts, hidden beneath perpetual snow. Their teaching is fierce, focused, and proud. Students wear fur-lined robes and study combat magic as early as their first year. Dark arts are not forbidden, but they are feared and understood. 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹 once taught Gellert Grindelwald. That is canon. But not all its students follow his path. Some emerge strong and quiet, the snow of their homeland still clinging to their boots as they study peace through strength. South of there, in France, nestled somewhere near the Pyrenees, lies Beauxbaton's Academy of Magic. Its spires shimmer like blue glass. Magic here is gentle and precise, focused on charm, transfiguration, and beauty in all its forms. Many believe Beauxbaton's is all silk and grace. But that is an outsider's view. Within its walls are scholars of fierce discipline, artisans of enchantment, and potioneers who speak to their cauldrons like musicians to their strings. Madame Maxim, who once arrived at Hogwarts with carriage and winged horses, remains its head mistress. That is canon too. Cross the oceans now. To Japan, where a school named Mahotokoro sits atop a mist-wreathed volcanic island. Its students arrive each day by enchanted storm petrel, flying from distant homes to the mountaintop. robes begin pale pink, deepening with learning, until they shine gold in the final years. 𝓍 is known for Quidditch. Its flyers are swift, deliberate, silent in the wind. Some say their seeker training begins in infancy. That, perhaps, is exaggeration. But their skill is not. In Brazil, beneath the canopy of the Amazon rainforest, rises Castelo Bruxo, a temple-like structure of stone and moss. Protected by Kaipora, small, fierce, jungle spirits, it teaches herbology and magizoology unlike anywhere else. Uniforms are bright green. Spells often borrow from indigenous enchantments. And yes, it's canon. In Africa, there is one wizarding school known across the continent, Ouagadougou, carved into the mountains of the moon. It is the largest of them all. Students do not always use wands. Instead, many perform magic with gestures alone, an art both subtle and powerful. Dream magic, astronomy, transfiguration, these are their specialties. Its graduates speak to the stars as easily as to stone. Admission letters arrive not by owl, but through dreams. Yes, that's canon too. Even in North America, hidden deep in Massachusetts, stands 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, founded by a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, Isolde Sayre, and her nomai, non-magical, husband. Its house system is different: Thunderbird, Wampus, Horned Serpent, Pukwudgie. Its founder was raised with stories of Hogwarts, but built something new. A school that blended cultures, gave second chances, and grew into one of the great institutions of the modern magical world. Some say their sorting ceremony is louder than Hogwarts. Whether that's canon, or just rivalry, is up for debate. And then there are the places without schools, where magic is taught in family lines, oral traditions, and sacred scripts. In India, some wizards train under gurus in secret ashrams, combining ancient spellcraft with alchemical texts far older than the British ministry. In Australia, wand lore developed differently, more attuned to weather, desert stone, and ancestral spirits. In Egypt, spells have been passed down through tombs and papyri, guarded by wards older than Latin itself. These stories, some canon, some drawn from confirmed notes, remind us of something essential. Magic did not begin at Hogwarts. And it does not end there. So wherever a child is born beneath starlight, wherever a potion bubbles over fire, wherever someone whispers a word that makes the world shift, magic is watching. And waiting. And somewhere, perhaps even now, a new school prepares to open its doors. Before there was language, there were creatures. Before the first spell was spoken, the sky had already seen dragons. Before a wand was carved, unicorns had already galloped through silent glades, shedding no sound. Some beasts are magical because of what they can do. Others simply are magic. Take the hippogriff. You bow first. Always. If it bows back, you may approach. If it doesn't, you walk away with your dignity intact, and hopefully, your limbs. Buckbeak was one such creature. Proud, watchful, with eyes like storm glass. He once carried Harry Potter high over the lake, away from death, and into freedom. And later, he lived with Hagrid, renamed Witherwings for a time, still wild but fiercely loyal. That is canon. And then there are the Thestrals, those skeletal horses with bat-like wings, invisible to any who have not seen death. They pull the carriages at Hogwarts. Most students never notice. Until one day, they do. Harry saw them for the first time in his 5th year, after the death of Cedric Diggory. And he did not flinch. He looked. And they looked back. But some creatures dwell deeper still. Acromantulas, like Aragog, who once ruled the forest behind Hogwarts. Fearsome. Venomous. Intelligent, and yet not human. Aragog feared only one thing, the basilisk. And that takes us below. The basilisk, once bred by Salazar Slytherin himself, slept beneath the castle for centuries. 50 feet long. A gaze that kills. Fangs that pierce through magic itself. It was awoken once, just once, in the Chamber of Secrets. Directed by Tom Riddle's Echo. and slain by Harry with the sword of Gryffindor. The same sword would later destroy Horcruxes. Basilisk venom is one of the few known substances capable of destroying such magic. That's why the sword mattered. That, too, is canon. But not all creatures are monstrous. There are house elves, like Dobby, who served the Malfoy family until Harry set him free with a sock. It is a small detail, yes, but one that holds more magic than most spells. Dobby died saving Harry Potter. He was buried with a hand-carved stone. Here lies Dobby, a free elf. And that grave remains, near Shell Cottage, untouched by time or tide. Hard canon. Other elves, like Creature, who once cursed Harry under his breath, changed, too. When Harry treated him with kindness, Creature responded with fierce loyalty. He led the defense of Grimmauld Place in Harry's absence. He wore Regulus's locket like a badge. The lesson was never spoken outright, but you feel it. Kindness is its own kind of magic. And what of centaurs? They are not beasts, though the Ministry once said so. They are proud, noble, and stargazing creatures who walk the line between wisdom and war. Firenze was one of them. He taught divination at Hogwarts when Trelawney was dismissed. He spoke in riddles and galaxies. And when he returned to the forest, the stars followed him. Beyond them, still, are creatures few have ever seen. The Phoenix, like Fawkes, Dumbledore's companion, whose tears heal, whose song is hope itself. Fawkes vanished after Dumbledore's death, and has not been seen since. Some say phoenixes come only to those who burn with purpose. And when that purpose ends, so do they. There are goblins, too. Magical, intelligent, and proud. They do not trust wizards. They never have. They run Gringotts, but they do not run on gold alone. Their magic is different. Older. Some call it Wandless. Some call it ownership of craft, where to make something is to own it forever. It was a goblin, Griphook, who helped Harry into the Lestrange vault. And later betrayed him. But betrayal, too, has its own logic. And finally, there are creatures we cannot name. Beings in the Department of Mysteries, in sealed vaults. Beings that whisper in veil rooms, like the one Sirius Black fell through, where no spell can bring back a voice. What lives behind the veil? No one knows. But those who listen closely sometimes think they hear someone they once loved calling their name. The magical world is not just spells and staircases. It is wildness. It is instinct. It is beings who do not ask permission to exist. And when you walk the corridors of Hogwarts, remember, you're never alone. Not truly. The walls breathe. The forest listens. And in the shadows, the old magic stirs, alive, watching, patient. Long after the last spell was cast and the last curse deflected, long after Harry Potter walked away from the forest and chose to live, the world grew quieter. But not still. Because magic does not disappear when the story ends. It becomes something else. It becomes memory. There are no parades in Diagon Alley, no golden statues of the Chosen One, no Ministry-declared Heroes' Day. Harry wouldn't have allowed it. He never wanted to be a symbol. He only ever wanted peace. And he got it. Mostly. But the world could not forget. In Hogwarts Library, there's now a glass case. Inside rests the torn cover of an old potions book. Its margin still scribbled with Sectum Sempra, Levi Corp, and notes in a sharp, hurried hand. The Half-Blood Prince's legacy, preserved, not celebrated. Because even painful memories deserve to be held, if they shaped what came next. In the Gryffindor common room, if you press your ear to the wall beside the fireplace, some say you can hear laughter echoing faintly, for boys once called Padfoot, Prongs, Moony, and Wormtail, long before betrayal and war. One of them died for a friend. One died trying to protect a son. One tried to fix his own darkness and never quite could. And one lost himself. But their story is part of it, too. At Shell Cottage, the grave still stands. Dobby's grave. tended, not by a gardener, but by the sea. Waves brush the stone like fingertips, and shells still appear there from time to time, gifts, no one knows from whom. Perhaps from the elves. Perhaps from the wind. In the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid is gone. The details of how, or when, or where a canon has not said. But we can imagine. The forest remembers him. Centaurs step lightly where he once walked. Acromantulas, if any remain, do not cross certain routes. And 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, Hagrid's giant half-brother, vanished into the deep hills after his death. No one has seen him since. But if you leave rock cakes out on a full moon night, sometimes they're gone by morning. Harry grew older. His scar no longer hurt. That, the book tells us plainly. He raised 3 children with Ginny. He worked for justice. He tried, imperfectly, earnestly, to build a better world than the one he inherited. Hermione went further. Some say she became Minister for Magic. That's not yet confirmed. But it feels true, doesn't it? Ron ran a joke shop with George for a while. Laughed again. It took time. But laughter returned. Neville became a professor. Luna married, eventually, a man named Rolf, and wandered the world looking for creatures others believed impossible. And Hogwarts taught every one of their children. But legacy isn't just about the big names. Not only about the Potters or the Dumbledores. Legacy is the first year who helps a classmate find their toad. It's the Ravenclaw who tutors a Hufflepuff without being asked. It's the Slytherin who chooses kindness when cruelty would have gone unnoticed. It's the Gryffindor who admits they're afraid. Those stories are not written in books. But Hogwarts knows them. She keeps them in her staircases, her shifting halls, her portrait whispers. Because every spell ever cast in her halls echoes still. And every wand ever raised in defense of love left a mark you cannot see, but you can feel if you're quiet enough. There will always be another threat. Another shadow rising. But now, the magical world has something it didn't always have, a memory. And memory, in magic, is not just remembrance. It is defense. It is foundation. It is how the world says, never again. You've heard every echo now. From the first whisper of wandless magic in ancient woods to the rising steam of the Hogwarts Express, from founders and phoenixes to prophesies and pensieves. From darkness undone to children boarding trains not for war, but for wonder. And so, we reach the last page. But this story does not close like a door. It fades like lantern light. Soft. Gentle. And somehow, still glowing. We've seen magic take many forms. Sometimes it was loud, crackling from wands in duels beneath shattered skies. Sometimes it was quiet, a mother's protection, sealed into her child's skin. Magic, we learned, is not always in the spell itself. Sometimes, it's in the choosing. Harry chose love over vengeance. Snape chose loyalty, though too late to be thanked. Neville chose to stand, even when alone. Luna chose truth, no matter how odd. And Dobby chose freedom, in the end. Every one of them left behind something more than spellwork. They left behind a way to be. We learned that evil can wear many faces. A handsome student with a winning smile, who murders for power. A charismatic leader preaching purity, who builds a prison from words. A bureaucrat in pink, who believes cruelty is policy. And we learned that good isn't always clean. A headmaster with secrets too heavy to share. A hero who breaks rules to save lives. A spy who loved and lied in equal measure. Because morality in the magical world, like our own, is rarely neat. It is human. And humanity is messy, but worth defending. We discovered places no muggle has ever walked. A mirror that shows your deepest desire. A library where books whisper curses. A train station between life and death, white and endless. A forest where unicorns run in moonlight, never aging. We met creatures who defied logic and beings who defied fate. We found wand cores made of phoenix feather, heartstring, and unicorn hair, and we learned that wands choose not the powerful, but the compatible. We learned that love is a kind of magic. And that memory is its echo. Along the way, we visited every part of the world the canon allowed. The 11 great magical schools, from Castellabruxo to Wagadu. The Department of Mysteries, where magic studies itself. Godric's Hollow, and the house with the roof blown open. Shell Cottage, and the grave of a free elf. The Room of Requirement, which only appears when you truly need it. And Hogwarts itself, a castle with moods and secrets, older than Britain, and somehow more alive than stone should be. We followed the canon. Every word. From the 7 books. To Pottermore's Law. To the controversial script of the Cursed Child, which we softened and honored. We marked the known. We labeled the uncertain. And when we wandered, we told you why. You now carry every truth J.K. Rowling placed in the world of Harry Potter. And more than that, you carry the feeling of it. That matters, too. And so, what now? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps sleep. But perhaps you'll gone. And so I'll leave you now. The fire's low. The ink is dry. The last feather from Fawkes has settled. If you've listened closely, if you've truly heard, then you've walked through every hallway of the wizarding world. You know the cost of power. The worth of friendship. The weight of grief. And the echo of courage. Sleep now, child of magic. You've learned what even wizards take lifetimes to understand. That the brightest light doesn't come from spells or stars. It comes from choosing, again and again, to do what is right. Even when it's hard. Even when no one sees. Even when you're afraid. Especially then. Good night. And mischief, always managed. Oh, you're still awake? How curious. Since you've just heard all of canon, this extra hour will be a blend of deep lore, fan fiction, and mystical bedtime storytelling. Most drift off before the last echo of the Sorting Hat fades, before the final flicker of wand-like curls into shadow. But not you. You've stayed behind, just like the portraits that pretend to sleep, and the staircases that shift when no one's watching. That's perfect. Because there's more. Stories they never told in class. Magic buried so deep, not even Dumbledore dared disturb it. Tonight, we begin the midnight chapter, a tale whispered between the cracks of canon. And the first part? Let's just say it begins with a clock that shouldn't tick. And an owl that isn't an owl at all. Minerva McGonagall was old. That much she had accepted. Not the quiet sort of old that shrinks into armchairs and curtain patterns. No, she was the fierce sort. Wiry and sharp, like the edge of a quill that had copied spells for too many decades. Her eye still sparked with calculation. Her mind had not dulled. But her knees had begun to protest, and her breath, once clipped and confident, now came with the faintest whisper of hesitation. She had officially retired from Hogwarts 5 years prior, a ceremony, a statue, and 1,000 candles lit in the Great Hall to honor her tenure. But she had never left. Her quarters remained untouched. Her books, her real ones, not the ones she let the ministry catalogue, still lined her shelves. And late at night, when the school sighed with sleep and portraits whispered to one another like dreamers in picture frames, she would walk the halls barefoot. That was when she saw it. The owl. But not just any owl. No school owl. No post owl. This one was black as ink, with stars freckled across its wings like a sky pulled tight into feathers. It had no parchment. No letter. But it did have something in its talons, a small brass cog, old and worn. As McGonagall turned the corner on the 4th floor, near the entrance to the astronomy tower, the owl dropped it on the floor with a deliberate clink, then flew into the shadows, no sound at all. She stared down at the cog. It was etched in runes, ancient ones. Founder's Era. The kind of runes even the Department of Mysteries had stopped trying to decode. And then she heard it. A tick. Just one. A sound that hadn't echoed in Hogwarts in over a century. She turned. The clock tower, the one that had been silent since the war, when its gears were charred and stuck by a Death Eater's fire hex, was ticking again. Once. Then again. Tick. Tick. But only when she held the cog. Later that night, under the excuse of checking the structural integrity of high towers in 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, she returned. Alone. She reached the top of the winding stairwell, and for the first time in years, the gears above her head stirred, sluggish and tired. The great pendulum, long frozen mid-swing, gave a groan and twitched. She placed the cog into the old brass plate at the tower's base, a plate shaped like the Hogwarts crest but missing its heart. The moment she set it in, something clicked. But it wasn't a mechanical sound. It was magical. A whisper, like parchment being turned in a long-forgotten book. The gears groaned to life, and the giant timepiece chimed. Once. Softly. And the room changed. It always looked like a room, the clock tower. Just beams, dust, and the bones of a mechanism older than most professors. But now, something shifted in its corners. The air folded in on itself like a spell collapsing. In the center of the room stood a table. A table that hadn't been there before. On it, a scroll. McGonagall approached slowly, wand raised, although she knew this was no ordinary threat. This was old magic. Not dark, but deep. The scroll was sealed with green wax and pressed with a sigil she hadn't seen since she was a girl. It was Salazar Slytherin's crest. But not the one you'd find on house banners. This one had no snake. Instead, a tree. Roots tangled like runes. Branches like scars. She opened the scroll, and the ink glowed faintly in the moonlight. It read. For seeds, for corners, for keys long buried. One wakes. One sleeps. One guards. One wanders. You have found the first. And beneath that, in handwriting she had only seen once before, in a letter Albus had let her read the day before he died, were 4 names. Godric Gryffindor. Helga Hufflepuff. Rowena Ravenclaw. Salazar Slytherin. But under each was something else. Something new. A second name. A successor. A soul chosen to awaken an ancient pact. And under Salazar's name was hers. Minerva McGonagall. She dropped the scroll. And that's when the owl returned. Only now, it was no owl. It changed in mid-year, not like an animagus, not like a patronus, but like memory, folding in reverse. When it landed on the window ledge, it was a woman. Pale, tall, in robes stitched with constellations. And her eyes were not human. Minerva, the woman said softly. 1 key is turned. 3 remain. And the forest is stirring. The potter's cottage in Godric's Hollow had been repaired long ago, restored carefully, reverently, by witches who whispered charms as though speaking in church. But it was never sold. Never claimed. The ministry called it preserved for historical integrity. But really, no one wanted to live there. Except for a boy named Ellis. He didn't live in the cottage itself. He lived next door, in the pale blue house with ivy on the fence and a garden that bloomed out of season. He wasn't magical. At least, not on paper. His name had never appeared in the Hogwarts registry. He had never broken a toy with his mind or flown with accidental magic. But Ellis saw things. Small things. Like the candle in the Potter house flickering, though no one had lit it. Or the shadow in the nursery window, even though the room was empty. Or the same owl landing on the same fence post every Wednesday at midnight, wings shimmering faintly like smoke catching starlight. He didn't tell anyone, of course. Because Ellis had already learned that the moment you said, "I see something no one else does," people look at you like you're broken. But the house watched him. And one October night, it blinked. It started with a hum. Ellis was outside, sketching in his notebook, not of anything in particular, just shapes that felt like they were already there waiting to be found. The Potter cottage, silent and still as ever, suddenly shifted. Not physically. Not a creak or a crack. Something older. Like the air had turned and remembered its past. And in the center of the lawn, something began to rise. Not from the ground, from the light. Moonlight bent around itself, folding until it took form. A door. Standing upright, with no walls. Old. Oak. Carved with runes Ellis had drawn before, not knowing what they meant. The door was closed. And yet, from behind it, came birdsong. Not birds like here. Birds that didn't exist. Ellis stood. And the door opened. He didn't remember walking through it. But he was no longer in Godric's Hollow. He was in a library. No, the library. You could feel it. Shelves that climbed forever. Books without titles. Some too hot to touch, others dripping ink like blood. And at the center of the room stood a desk. Behind it sat a man. He wore the same robes as the portraits in Hogwarts. But this man was real. Quiet. Steady. "You're early," the man said, not looking up. Ellis opened his mouth, but no sound came. "You shouldn't be here," the man went on. "You're not on the list." A pause. "But the library let you in. That means something." He finally looked up. And for a split second, Ellis could have sworn the man's eyes were not eyes at all. They were the night sky. "Your name," he said softly. "Say it." Ellis tried. The word caught. And that's when the ink rose. From the books. From the desk. From the very air. It formed a circle around him, whispering, wandless, but not powerless. Forgotten, but not lost. Chosen, not marked. The man at the desk stood. "There are things coming back, Ellis. Magic that predates wands. That predates even speech. And you, boy from the Hollow, are a door." The room began to fade. The books closed themselves. And the last thing Ellis saw was the man placing a key on the desk. It pulsed once with gold light. And then everything vanished. He awoke on the lawn. The notebook beside him now bore a new sketch. A tree with 4 roots and a door in its trunk. The same symbol etched into the Hogwarts crest beneath the Forbidden Forest, the one no student had ever noticed. And in his pocket? A key. Carved from ash wood. And whispering, "One wakes." In the lowest level of the Ministry of Magic, far below the Department of Mysteries, beyond even the level where time turners were once shattered, there is a door. No lock. No handle. Just a spiral etched in stone. Few know it exists. Fewer still have entered. It is called the Stillness Room. Its enchantments are so ancient that they do not register on modern spell detectors. Wards laird not with charms, but with intentions, promises bound in blood, memory, and something stranger still. But one man opens the door once a week. His name is Corwin Thatch. He is the last keeper of time. Corwin is not young. He's not quite old, either, but he bears the look of someone who has stood still while the world spun madly around him. His beard doesn't grow. His watch never ticks. And though he has worked at the ministry for 46 years, he's never aged a day past 40. People say he's a magical anomaly. That he must be part Veela. Or half giant. Or maybe cursed. But they are wrong. Corwin was chosen. Not by a person. But by time itself. The Stillness Room is not empty. Inside is a pendulum. Gigantic. Suspended not from the ceiling, but from nothing, it simply hangs in midair, its motion slow and constant, slicing through magic like a blade dipped in silence. Beneath it is the spiral. 12 rings of stone, each carved with runes older than gobbledygook or Latin. Every ring turns independently, like a planetarium built for spells. Once a week, Corwin stands at the spiral's edge and watches. He doesn't interfere. Doesn't speak. He simply watches. Because if one ring ever stops, or spins in reverse, the world forgets something. Last year, a ring faltered for 7 minutes. And the wizarding world forgot the unicorns of Belarus. Every book. Every drawing. Gone. Only Corwin remembered. Because that is the price of being keeper. You remember what time erases. On a Monday. The Monday after Minerva McGonagall placed the cog into the clock tower, and Ellis held the key of ash, the spiral rang. It didn't chime. It rang. A deep, low tolling from beneath the world, like the heartbeat of the earth had hiccuped. Corwin staggered. He had never heard it before. Not once. In 46 years. The pendulum stopped. Dead center. And in that frozen silence, Corwin heard something impossible. A voice. One word. Return. He did not wait. He left the ministry without a word. No bag. No wand. No paperwork. He walked into the alleys of London like a man possessed, although the truth is much worse, he had been called. To Hogwarts. Specifically, to the lake beneath it. Few know the lake's true name. Not even the headmasters. Not even Dumbledore. But Corwin did. He had read the Book of Water, one of the 7 primordial texts, and the lake's name was Marysthal. It means the mirror below. And that day, it mirrored nothing. No clouds. No stars. Just blackness. He walked to the edge. Removed his shoes. And stepped in. The lake did not ripple. It opened. It swallowed him in silence. Beneath the water, time bent sideways. He did not breathe, yet he did not drown. He fell, or rose, or floated, it was hard to tell. But in that twilight void, he came to rest before something impossible. A door. Like the one Ellis had seen. Only this one was not made of wood. It was made of bones. Dragon bones. Phoenix feather ribs. The spine of a basilisk. The symbol carved into its center? A spiral. 12 rings. Corwin placed his hand against it. And it opened. Inside, time screamed. It was not a sound. It was everything. A tunnel of clocks, of moments, of battles and births and falling wands. Images flickered past him, Grindelwald's duel, the founding of 𝓢𝓵𝓮𝓮𝓹, the moment Lily placed herself between wand and child. All of it. And none of it. Then it stopped. A chamber. Circular. Empty. Except for 4 chairs. And in each chair? A figure. Not alive. Not dead. Remembered. Godric. Helga. Rowena. Salazar. Not their bodies, but their intentions. Spirits forged from memory, from the legacy of every student who ever wore their crest. They turned toward him. And spoke not with voices, but with thought. The tree is stirring. The wards are fading. A new age comes, and with it, an old one. Corwin stood silently. And they asked the question that must never be asked. Will you turn the spiral back? And he, the man who had watched for 46 years, said, No. I will let it turn. The founders faded. The door sealed. And when Corwin emerged from the lake, he was no longer the keeper of time. He was its messenger. He looked toward the castle. And he saw Ellis watching him from the forest's edge, though Ellis could not remember how he'd gotten there. Corwin raised a hand. and the air around them thickened. For keys had been turned. One by the owl. One by the boy. One by the clock. And now, by time itself. The fifth? No one knew. Because the fifth was never a thing. It was a person. And somewhere across the veil of time, behind the tapestry of the Hall of Prophecies, that person just woke up. Diagon Alley had changed. Oh, the bricks were the same. The cobblestone still uneven, and the Weasley shop still pulsed with neon mischief from 3 doors down. But the sound had changed. Beneath the laughter, beneath the chatter of wand sales and lunch orders and niffler thefts, there was something else. A note. One held too long. Too low. Almost silent. The kind of sound you don't hear so much as feel in your ribs. And it was coming from Ollivander's. The shop had been rebuilt twice since the war. Garrick Ollivander, the master wandmaker who had once identified a wand by its pores between flicks, had long passed. His grandson, Tobias Ollivander, now ran the shop. Tobias was clever. Quiet. A man who whittled faster than he spoke. But even Tobias was unsettled by the humming. It had started a week ago. Deep in the back, past the shelves that hadn't been touched since the shop reopened. Near the vault, where unfinished wands and dangerous cores were sealed away. It started as a vibration. Then a whisper. Then a note. One long, clear, and impossibly pure. It wasn't made by any box. Or wand. Or living thing. It was coming from beneath the vault floor. The vault had one lock. Warded with the breath of every living Ollivander. A wandmaker's inheritance. When Tobias placed his hand on the seal that morning, it moved. Not opened. Not cracked. It moved on its own. And that terrified him. He gathered 3 things. His wand. A copy of his grandfather's final ledger. And a letter written in case the vault sings. That letter had been left to him unopened, waxed in the old wandmaker's seal, phoenix feather pressed in gold. He broke the seal. And read 5 words. The wand has chosen you. He descended the vault staircase alone. The hum grew louder. More focused. More alive. It wasn't just humming. It was singing. Not with lyrics. Not with sound. With intention. The way birdsong might sound if it had language. The way a heartbeat might sing if it could speak. And in the center of the vault, something floated. A wand. No shelf. No velvet lining. Just air. And firelight catching in its grain. It was black. But not dead. It pulsed, slowly, like something remembering how to breathe. Tobias didn't recognize the wood. Nor the shape. It was too smooth. Too long. And the core, he couldn't see it. But he felt it. And suddenly, all at once, he knew. Phoenix ash. Not feather. Ash. The remains of a phoenix burned by magical fire, a rare, terrible thing. A phoenix willingly sacrificing itself into cursed flame. The ash was said to hold memories of spells that had never been spoken aloud. Of magic before language. Before Hogwarts. Before even wands. This one should not exist. And yet here it was. Waiting. For him. When he touched it, the world changed. Not outside. Inside. He saw Ellis. He saw McGonagall. He saw Corwin Thatch rising from the lake. He saw the spiral spinning backward and forward at once. He saw the door of bone. He saw the tree of 4 roots, growing in reverse. And he heard a voice. This is not your wand. But you will carry it. Until it sings to the true air. The wand fell silent. Tobias gasped, as if surfacing from water. He clutched the wand to his chest. It felt warm. Like a heartbeat. He returned to the shop, locked the door, and for the first time in a century, he turned the closed indefinitely sign backward. Then he began to write. A new wand record. The page read, Core, Phoenix Ash. Wood, unknown. Length, 14 inches. Flexibility, unyielding. Owner, not yet. Song, pending. Note, woke itself. 3 days later, across the world in a city untouched by Hogwarts' shadow, a girl stepped into an alley that hadn't been there the day before. And at the same moment she crossed its threshold, the wand began to hum again. Soft. Rising. As if it had just taken its first breath in 2,000 years. Her name was Isa Quinn, and she had never meant to find the alley. It wasn't there the day before. She had walked this same stretch of cobbled Lisbon twice every week since she was small, past the green shutters, past the pastry stand with the cinnamon smoke, past the old bookshop that always smelled of salt. She knew this street. She owned it with the kind of quiet authority only daydreamers ever seemed to carry. But today, between the stone wall and the weeping fig tree, a new alley stood. Not cracked into being. Not recently built. It had always been there, she suddenly realized. Somehow, she'd simply never turned her head to see it. That made her stop. Because that was the kind of thing that magic does. The alley was narrow. The stones underfoot were dark, wet, uneven. Not like Lisbon's usual sunlit walkways. This path dipped down slightly, drawing her toward a coolness that felt too precise to be natural. Like it was waiting for her. She hesitated. Then stepped forward. The shadow swallowed her before the second step. And the sound of the street behind her vanished. Isa had always known she was off. Not strange. Not sick. Just off. At 7, she could hear the difference between dreams and real thoughts, and sometimes woke up reciting words no one had taught her. At 9, she caught a coin midair without moving her hand. The coin had changed direction. When asked how she'd done it, she only shrugged. Like the wind got confused, she said. At 11, she once touched a rusted door handle and heard a voice say, "You're early." No one else heard it. She didn't tell anyone. She had never made anything float. Never summoned light or fire or butterflies. But she felt things. And lately, she had begun to feel pulls, gentle tugs in her chest like the wind was calling her somewhere. Today, that somewhere had taken the form of a hallway hidden behind an alley that didn't exist. The passage narrowed. The walls became less like stone and more like bone. Not literal bones, but shapes that implied something ancient. They were smooth. Carved. Covered in symbols. And with each step, Isa's hand grew warmer. Not from the air, but from the pendant around her neck. It was simple, a loop of dull silver on a leather cord. A gift from her grandmother, who had died before she could explain what it meant. Isa had never taken it off. Now it pulsed faintly. She touched it. It pulsed again. And suddenly, she knew something she had never learned. This was not a hallway. It was a keyway. A path carved for those who could pass through doors not built by hand. Only 3 had walked it in the last 1,000 years. She was the 4th. The corridor opened into a room so wide it defied reason. Not a chamber. A field. Lit from nowhere, filled with grass that glowed softly beneath her feet like starlight condensed into blades. In the center stood a tree. But not like any tree Isa had seen. Its roots formed a spiral. Its trunk was carved with names. And its branches reached into nowhere, splitting into threads of golden light that formed a map so vast it seemed to contain entire worlds. Isa stepped closer. And the tree breathed. The light pulsed. The names shimmered. For stood out. Godric. Helga. Rowena. Salazar. But beneath them? Minerva. Corwin. Tobias. Ellis. And beneath those, a space. A blank. But not empty. It glowed faintly, like parchment holding a spell still being cast. The tree seemed to see her. And as she reached forward, her pendant glowed again. The tree whispered, not in sound, but in motion. Its branches shifted, like it was nodding. Then, from the spiral of roots, a door rose. Wood. Brass handle. Familiar. Isa stepped to it. Placed her palm on the center. And it opened, not to a room, but to a moment. She was no longer in the field. She stood inside a memory. But not hers. The castle was unfamiliar. Not Hogwarts. Not any she knew. It was older. Brutalist. Columns that sang faintly. A throne of chalk-white stone. And on it sat a man. He was covered in blood. Not his own. His wand, long, sharp, bone-white, was humming faintly. And in his lap, a scroll. She couldn't read the words. But the air around him burned with meaning. Suddenly, he looked up. Directly at her. His eyes were silver. And inside them swirled a storm. Daughter of the hollow tree, he said. You shouldn't be here yet. Isa couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Tell them, he whispered. They're waking too soon. The bindings won't hold. Not this time. The scroll in his lap began to burn. And then, she was back. Standing before the tree. But now, something was different. The blank name beneath the others? It glowed. And slowly, letter by letter, it carved itself into the wood. Isa Quinn. The branches above her shimmered. And the roots beneath her shifted, revealing 4 paths. Each one pulsing in a different color. Gold. Silver. Green. Blue. Not house colors. Not quite. More like versions of them. One path pulsed in rhythm with her pendant. And Isa, drawn by something deeper than instinct, began to walk. What she didn't know was that elsewhere, in Godric's Hollow, in the still lake, in the hidden vault beneath the ministry, every other name glowed too. The tree was no longer dreaming. It had awakened. And its 5th child had taken her first step. As Isa walked, the path changed. The air thickened. The sky flickered between stars. She passed memories, hovering in suspended motion like glass paintings. One showed McGonagall placing the cog. Another, Ellis holding the ash key. Another, Corwin turning from the spiral. And one, Tobias. The wand singing in his hand. But there was a 5th. Still forming. A shape building itself from song and dream and choice. And Isa could feel it was hers. She reached toward it. And again, the world shifted. She stood in a classroom. Now this was familiar. Stone walls. Floating chalk. A blackboard covered in runes that rearranged themselves every time she blinked. A figure turned. It was her grandmother. But younger. Bright-eyed. Laughing. She was holding a wand Isa had never seen. And she was teaching. To a classroom filled with students who glowed slightly at the edges. Not alive. But not gone. They turned. Smiled. And Isa, with a pang so sharp it felt like breaking, realized. They knew her. They had waited. Her grandmother walked toward her, wand at her side. My darling girl, she whispered. You're right on time. But? I'm not magical, Isa said. I've never cast a spell. I'm not. Her grandmother cupped her face. Magic doesn't begin in spells. It begins in questions. She handed Isa the wand. It felt familiar. Warm. Balanced. And humming. Not the same hum as Tobias' wand. But related. Family, almost. This is your wand, her grandmother said. The fifth. Born of voice. Powered by doors. It sings only when a choice is made. Isa looked down. The wand was now singing. And the tree was calling again. Behind her, the field reappeared. The door opened. And Isa stepped back through. But now she was not just walking. She was returning. Claimed. Seen. Sung into place. She stepped to the tree once more. And it bowed slightly, only slightly, as the fifth path opened beneath her. And for the first time in centuries, all 5 keys were awakened. Not to protect. Not to rebuild. But to choose. And far, far away, deep in a place that no one had entered since the founders laid their wands in the stone, a 6th branch trembled. A door began to form. Not made of wood. Not of bone. But of names. All the names of every witch and wizard who had ever lived. And one name at the center had begun to fade. And be replaced by another. So. You're still here. Still awake, like a curious moon peeking through the curtains. Then let's rest the tale for now, but not without tucking it in properly. Tonight, you heard the story after the story. A hidden chapter woven beneath the surface of Hogwarts and beyond the reach of even the cleverest marauder's map. You followed Professor McGonagall into the ticking silence of a broken clock tower, where time waited for a whisper and an owl dropped a cog older than memory. You watched young Ellis, a boy who had no wand, no prophecy, and yet saw through the veil of the world, into a library no book could ever describe. A boy who found a key that didn't open doors, but moments. You met Corwin Thatch, the last keeper of time, who walked into the lake not to drown, but to remember. Who stood before the Founder's echoes and chose not to stop time, but to let it flow. You listened to a wand hum. A wand born not of feather, but of ash. A wand that remembered fire and longed for song. Tobias Ollivander found it, not to wield, but to carry, until it found the one it was meant for. And then, you met her. Isa Quinn. A girl who had never made a spark, never lifted a feather. Yet heard the call of the keyway and stepped through a door that remembered her before she was born. She walked a path carved in roots, saw branches of memory, and was told something no sorting hat ever dared whisper. You are the 5th key. And when the tree sang her name, it didn't just accept her. It awakened. Now 5 names shimmer beneath the branches. And the 6th? That one is still waiting. Waiting for someone like you. So hush now. Let the doors stay closed, just for a little while longer. Let the wand go quiet. Let the spiral spin gently in the dark. And if you dream tonight, maybe, just maybe, you'll feel the tree breathe beneath you. And hear the hum of the wand that hasn't chosen you yet. Sleep well, keeper. We'll return when the next key turns.